Fabulous. I would like to call to order the Kaiser City Council and special session for Monday, May 8th, 2017. Ask our city recorder, please call roll.
Councilor Ryan?
Here.
Councilor Freeman?
Here.
Councilor Reed?
Here.
Mayor Clark?
Here.
Council President Parsons?
He's excused.
Councilor Herrera?
Here.
And Councilor Anderson.
Here.
Thank you very much. Tonight's process is to discuss specifically and have a public forum on a proposed parks fee. So the first thing we're going to do is get a report from our city staff.
Pledge of Allegiance.
It wasn't on here, but you know what? I think that would be okay.
Let's do that.
You know what? He reminds me, we always start city meetings with the Pledge of Allegiance. Let's rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I know, it does feel odd, doesn't it?
We did it last time. We went
Yeah.
without it last time.
What's that?
We didn't do it last time.
For work sessions, yeah. Good note to self.
Good. I'd rather.
Now it feels right. So first thing we're going to do is get a report from city staff. Any of you who went online and looked at the agenda for tonight saw the staff discussion recommendations. So we're going to have a report from them. And then if there's anybody specifically from the Parks Board who would like to lead off, I would like to invite one or more to do that. Then we're going to open it up to the list I have here. If you didn't sign up, don't worry. I will be asking as we conclude the list to make sure that people have had their opportunity to speak. And then we'll wrap up with council discussion. So that's kind of how this evening is going to roll out. And so City Manager, I turn it over to you.
Turn over to Bill.
Thank you, Chris. Madam Mayor, Council, people in the audience, the Parks Advisory Board has recommended the City Council implement a dedicated fee to sustainably fund park operations and improvements into the future. The results of a survey on this topic prepared by the Parks Advisory Board were presented to the City Council at the April 3rd, 2017 City Council meeting. The City Council directed staff to provide information and options to consider for the possible implementation of this fee. Staff believes the topics and options listed below should be considered by the City Council. 1. Should the City Council enact a fee dedicated to parks operations and improvements? 2. What amount should the fee be set at? 3. If a fee is enacted, should the fee be charged to residential, single-family and multifamily type properties only? 4. Should a fee be assessed to senior living apartments? 5. Should a discounted fee be established and assessed for low-income residents? 6. How should the fee, if enacted, be collected? Through the water and sewer bill or a separate mailing? 7. What is the effective date of the fee if one is enacted? 8. If the city utility bill is used as a delivery vehicle for the fee, should then the items on the bill be prioritized for payment received so as to eliminate shutting off a resident's water for non-payment of the park's fee? Attachment 1 included to this staff report includes information on revenue potentially created by enacting a dedicated parks fee with options for discounted fees and estimated expenses for different fee collection options for the City Council to review and consider. Staff recommendation, though potentially purely policy, there are a few points that staff feels strongly enough to include as part of our recommendation if the City Council chooses to create a parks fee. Number 1, provide a reduction of the fee, 50% or some other reduced rate for residents based on age, perhaps at 65 or at 70 years of age. Provide an exemption from the fee for residents who are 80 years old or older. Provide an exemption from the fee for residents who are at or below the federal poverty level. Number 4, the water bill is the most cost-effective and efficient fee delivery method for us to use, with likely the highest payment rate versus a separate billing or even a separate stuffer in the same envelope, which could be seen as junk mail and thrown away. Number 5, prioritize the items on the water bill so that a resident doesn't experience a water shutoff for non-payment of the parks fee. As such, money paid by a customer would first go towards satisfying their utility bills, then to the parks fee. The remedy for non-payment of the parks fee would be to send a customer to collections, not to shut off their water service or lien their property. One other thing that I neglected to put into the staff report that we do recommend also is that the general fund support currently provided to the Parks Fund be maintained at the current level, which for this fiscal year is about 3% of the general fund revenue, or a minimum of 2.5%, which is city council policy. The city council should receive input from the public, consider the information prepared by staff, and deliberate the matter. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
All right, thank you very much. City Manager?
I could throw in one tiny point of clarification on, in terms of keeping the general fund base support intact, is that we believe that that should be formulated as a percentage of revenues as opposed to a fixed dollar amount for two reasons. One, it can go up as revenues increase into the general fund, okay? And then also, if for whatever reason we have another recession that's even deeper than the one that we just got out of a few years back, where assessed values or real market value actually dives below assessed value and we see a reduction in actual general fund dollars, that percentage could go down with the general fund as well. So it can fluctuate both ways. But that keeps it squarely and firmly and fairly as a percentage of base support in the general fund. And then this would be purely increase in levels of service and not supplant any other funding.
Right. So that would dedicate it, so the funds that were collected as a parks fee would stay parks fee. The part that is part of our general fund now would remain in parks. So we would really see a difference, a change in the dollars going to our park system.
Yes.
Okay. That's a very good add, and I appreciate you making sure that got on the list. Okay, council, any questions for staff on the staff report? Councilor Ryan.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just to, so I don't make an assumption, Bill, because when we spoke with a lot of the residents for the survey, they said they were paperless and didn't see the survey in the paper bill. So I'm assuming that fee would be online as well. It would be both places and not just in the bill or just a separate stuffer.
Yes,
Correct.
if the collection mechanism was the water and sewer bill,
Yeah.
it would just be added to whatever format they receive them today.
That's what I meant to say is if. Thank you very much.
And the if is a very important, it's not an add-on word here. The whole process was started over a year ago with, we need to know what we all think as a community regarding funding for our parks and police. And no, I have not forgotten the funding for police. We have an excellent proposal from the police chief, and that is a community conversation we will engage in. But one of the reasons we took on the parks conversation first was because while we support our police and we want to appropriately staff our police, it is the police who are the experts on what that looks like in terms of the types of positions we need. When it comes to parks, there's a lot more citizen input that needs to go into that because it really depends on what we all as a community want to do. If we want to have a certain level of maintenance or if we want to add certain amenities, those are conversations that we can, as an informed citizenry, make that decision. So it has taken a lot longer to get here to have this conversation, but the survey, the articles in the paper, the neighborhood associations and other gatherings have been critical to make sure that we get as much input from all of us about our parks as possible. So that's part of the reasoning behind having one before the other, but it has never have been intended to be one instead of the other. These are conversations that we will continue to have as a community. So with that, I would like to invite a member of the Parks Board. Have you drawn straws? Oh, I'm sorry, Councilor Anderson, I forgot you.
Thank you.
My bad.
I had a question for you, Bill, with respect to your recommendation that you had on page 2 of your staff report, I believe. The first 2 items relate to a person's age, and then the third item relates to an issue of income of a household. Is that information that we're presently collecting from folks?
Tim actually collected some of that information in putting a spreadsheet together, the attachment, and that's based on demographics through the Council of Governments, Tim?
That would be correct, through the Council of Governments. We are not currently collecting date of birth or age or income levels.
Right, so, yeah.
That would be something that a customer would simply have to say, hey, I'm 75, here's my driver's license, and then we would log it and they would get the reduced fee.
That's for age,
Yeah.
Okay.
I think.
Yeah, no, I'm asking that question for a very specific reason because it's not information that we presently collect.
Correct.
How do we keep it stored safely, so forth and so on? It's because it sounds like it would be more on the customer having to provide that information.
Right, yeah,
Since
and
we don't collect
We
that
don't collect
presently.
it, and so it would, and we haven't gone through all of the mechanics of how this would actually look. We want to let the council and the community have the discussion first, and then if the council wants to move something forward, we'll develop the mechanical piece. And I have no doubt that we can do that.
Okay, yeah.
So,
I
we need to
asked
come
that-
up with the policy
I asked that
pieces
with a
first.
little bit of knowledge of utility billing and collection of that specific data. So, thank you.
Very good.
Well, and then on the income needs or, hitting a certain level, the federal golly, it has been a long day. The federal poverty line, thank you. Would that also be by self-identification, saying, okay, my income is at this level, therefore I like this fee waived, and so forth? And we would get that out there on our website and on the billing that if you qualify, please see us?
Yeah.
Okay.
We would develop a way.
Okay. And other utilities do this. They do not, or at least the ones you are familiar with. Based on income,
No.
they do not.
That's a special process that someone would have to verify that through a third party, because that's not information that a company, like say a natural gas provider, would be interested in keeping track of in their database.
Okay, good point. All right. Are there any other questions for staff? Now I'll come back to the Parks Board. Who drew the short straw? Come on down.
Well, good evening, Madam Mayor, members of the council, staff, and most importantly, to the folks out here. For the record, I'm Matt Lawyer, Kaiser resident, homeowner, and member of the Kaiser Parks Advisory Board. To be perfectly honest, I wasn't 100% prepared to discuss much, but what I'd like to go over are just the facts that were presented through this process. In March and April last year, the Kaiser Parks Advisory Board was presented with a series of complaints from a citizen in our city. And most of, if not all of it, was related specifically to maintenance and operations issues and issues that were specifically about safety. Our group decided to have a conversation about the safety and maintenance and operations needs for the city at face value. Many of us went out and looked specifically at some of the parks that were being addressed. We were given a very good, comprehensive presentation from Robert Johnson where he discussed some of those issues. And we decided at that point that it was time to take a really good adult look at what we were doing in our city with our parks. We were tasked with discussing three potential sustainable funding outcomes. One would be the proposed parks fee in front of you today. Another would be a parks district, and lastly would be a bond or levy for 5 years. After some discussion, we determined that the fee seemed to be the most sustainable and most feasible, but that wouldn't come without a lot of work. And through a lot of discussion with the mayor and various members of the city council, we brought it to the city council and discussed it, and were tasked with a monumental amount of homework to do. The two-page homework that Councilor Collier, former Councilor Collier, so eloquently called it, contained a lot of information and a lot of questions, basically to derive from the participants of the survey what they wanted from their city, what we wanted our dollars to do for our city. Recognizing safety and infrastructure and maintenance was a major priority, the data came back and basically said the same thing. So going through the questions, there was basically maintenance and operations on one hand, and then anything new on the other hand. Well, the highest rated new amenity scored only about mid-range of the most important maintenance issues. So maintenance and operations, clearly to the people in the city of Kaiser, is a big deal. So the data that was presented, we asked folks what their age group was. Our number one response in terms of age was adults 55 and older, with more than 40% responding to the survey. And we had in all 1,102 responses. The second was whether or not they were a Kaiser citizen, and in fact, we did have a few folks that weren't from Kaiser but utilized the dog park quite a bit. It was only a 13 out of the total, so I don't think it pollutes the data. We asked folks which park they live closest to, and we had over 350 responses on that. And then we asked people, as it related to the maintenance and operations issues on question 4, what those levels were. And again, the majority of the responses were maintaining restrooms, maintaining current level of services from removal of garbage and things of that nature, updating and repairing parks. So people recognize that there are damaged facilities, not necessarily just playgrounds, but parks in general, bad paths, poor lighting, things of that nature. Then we asked about the new items. Big one there was removal of poison oak and poison ivy. More walking paths were another large one, as well as more restrooms in our parks. Moving on to the next set of questions, was what level of funding would folks support? More than 83% responded in favor of something in levels from $2 through $8. They were all within about a 3% range of favor, with, again, like I said, 83% responding in favor of something. We also asked folks if they wanted to continue to participate in raising money for the city of Kaiser Parks, and more than 85% responded no. So read into that what you wish. What we have is that's the data. We went through a tremendous amount of outreach. We went to all of the neighborhood associations and spoke with folks. I know there's a few in the room now that I saw personally. We had many, I think 4 work weekends where we stood out in various public areas and handed out QR code cards and asked folks to take a look at it and submit their survey. We had 2 work sessions here in the city chambers, the council chambers. One was largely towards youth athletics, which we had a fairly good turnout for that. And the second one, sadly, hardly anybody showed up. We've engaged in excessive social media outreach and other types of online outreach, as well as the city providing hard copy surveys in the water bill for the months of January and February. And we've collected all the data. We've had really good conversations with people both opposed to the idea, somewhat supportive idea, and people that are really, really passionate about it. And I think that everybody's comments have been intelligent and have been passionate. And clearly we have folks in Kaiser that really, really care about the future of their city, and I'm excited that they're all here, and am looking forward to seeing what their comments are. And so that's basically what I got. I just wanted to thank my colleagues for all their hard work and putting up with a lot of changes and a lot of conversation. This was, I mean, it was a full 9 months of really hard work to do the best we could to make sure we had all the right questions to ask. You know, some folks were saying, you're just asking too much, you know, but we didn't want to just say, we're the government, trust us, because this is our dollars, this is our money, and you know, I'm going to be just as affected by anybody else in the room if this does go forward, and that's why I think it's very important that the people behind me presently really have a good opportunity, and I really appreciate the council being willing to do that. And I'm going to shut up now, but I'll let my colleague Clint Holland say something if he wishes.
I'm just here to hold his hand. He covered it all.
There's been no better mentor than Clint Holland and Jim Taylor and Richard Walsh, and I've been very lucky to have them break me through in the last year or so.
Our whole Parks Board has done a great job on this.
It has been a collaborative effort on the parts of the Parks Board, and I definitely want to give my deep thanks and appreciation to all of you for the hard work you put in. This is new ground for Kaiser. We haven't had this kind of conversation before about our parks and how we're going to take care of them financially. So when you're doing something new, it takes a little longer. Takes a lot of thought and a lot of dedication to get it done, so I really appreciate it. So with that, does anybody have any questions for Matt or any of the Parks Board members? Then I'm going to get into the list here so we can be quiet and we can listen to all of you who came tonight and hear what you have to say. So I'm going to just go down the list. And I'm going to start off with Bill Quinn.
5 minutes.
Yep, 5 minutes each. The timer will be green until you have 1 minute left, then it'll go yellow. At red, you can finish your sentence. And then if we have questions, we will do it at that point. Mr. Quinn, the floor is yours. Oh, you just turned it off.
Off?
Now you turned it on.
Is it on? Okay, thank you, Mayor and council members. Now, I understand the difference between a tax and a fee is if the people, if you chose to have a tax, then it would have to go to the vote of the people. And a fee, the city council could just impose a fee and impose how much without a vote of the people. That's one thing I would be objected to. The vote would be a lot more strong than a survey. I mean, you could write a survey and get any kind of answer you wish. The thing is that if you impose the fee, I would suggest that you take away the $360,000 or whatever it is that it goes to the parks out of your budget and put that to the police department and hire a couple of more cops. You're talking about maintaining that. Well, you're not going to maintain it after you get this fee imposed, I would hope. So my recommendation to the council is, if you're going to have a fee, you can still go out and vote for the fee and get the true feeling of the people. And that's all I have to say.
All right, does anybody have any questions for Mr. Quinn? All right, thank you so much. Next on my list, glasses. Oh, dear. Bill Kreitzer? Yes.
I had a couple of questions to pose.
If you could just say your name and your city of residence for the record, and then she'll have it recorded.
My name is Bill Kreitzer. I'm a former Parks Board member over 2 years ago, or about 2 years ago.
You live in Kaiser?
And I live in Kaiser.
Right. Thank you. The floor is yours.
And have for about 5 years, or 6 years. Couple of questions. One is that, is there a minimum requirement for the number of acres or parks per capita within a city the size of Kaiser? That'll dovetail into the other question, so I don't need to answer that right away. But I was curious about what that may be or where we are in that picture. And the other is that about 18 months ago, there was discussion about the sale of Palmacia Park, being a riverfront property. And this is a very small park. It has parking for 3 cars approximately. And if you want to picnic there, you're picnicking in the backyard of the people that are adjacent to it, which much of their picnics come down into the park as well. I mean, they use part of the parks as their own. So that was the discussion when I left the Parks Board, I guess. And I just don't, if there'd been any further discussion about what that was, and if there's even like a minimum consideration of a community garden so that it has more use for more people, and take it off the maintenance rolls. Now, I know there's not a lot of maintenance in that small park, but there is some. Thank you.
All right, so I'm going to ask our city manager if we can address, the Palmacia question's a good one, and we did address that and answer it.
And actually, I'm gonna let Bill take a stab at it. We did look at that, and we definitively answered that we were not going to sell it for various reasons.
We investigated the potential sale of Palmacia Park and the number of lots that could be created, buildable lots, single-family home lots that could be created on that property. And what we came up with was that, as I recall, there was one for sure single-family lot being able to be created, and maybe a second, certainly not a third. The shape of the property, the layout of the property, access to it, existing power line easements. It just made it really difficult to create buildable lots. And so the council made the decision, and I believe the Parks Board weighed in on this too, that there wasn't enough revenue potential with that property for homes, even though it's riverfront, like you mentioned, that it really didn't make sense to try and sell it. So that was deemed not a good option.
In addition to that, a group of residents in the area came forward and offered to sort of step up their game in helping us redevelop our thought process on that park. So, and I don't know where that's gone, but I know that there has been some more community activity revolving around that park. So.
And there's the dike runs through there, so that big concrete piece there, that is that's the dike that prevents flooding. So going into that hillside and so forth also is very limiting. We can't go any farther than that particular boundary. So the power lines are a big one along with the dike.
In relation to the acreage of parks, that's developed when we work through our comprehensive plan for the entire city, and it basically says your community should support roughly this many acres of park. Yes, Shannon?
Are you talking about Parks Master Plan?
Not the Parks Master Plan. The comprehensive plan for the city also identifies
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes.
park ground.
Yes, I don't recall what it is, but yes, it does
So,
identify
but
that.
it identifies the amount of park ground that you should have and actually develops a maximum amount of park ground. And I don't know that there's actually a requirement for a certain number of acres, but you can't be above a certain number of acres based on the comprehensive plan.
But in the master plan for the parks, that was cited, if I recall, you can correct me if I'm wrong, as a guideline for what we should be looking at. It's not only the types of parks, but also the locations, so we don't end up with parks poor areas of town. And we do have a couple of areas of town that are underserved by parks at this time.
Yeah.
But that would
Where you
require
locate parks becomes a social equity issue, definitely, in a community, so.
Okay.
Does that help?
Just as a final note, I still advocate and did when I was on the Parks Board, the selling of Palmacia to take care of some capital projects and which would reduce the amount of maintenance.
Thank you very much. Next on my list is Dr. Jerry McGee. And then Eric Howell, you are on deck. Yeah, he signed up.
My name is Jerry McGee. I'm a resident of Kaiser and have been for 50 years. And in listening to Bill's report earlier, as near as I have my age bracket figured out, the parks will be paying me something. Seriously, Madam Mayor and councilors and staff, over the last few months, I've talked to a number of folks about the parks, and I've drawn some conclusions from those discussions, at least from those folks, that they like their parks. And this is true even with the older citizens that seldom, if ever, use the parks. They still like their parks. They saw a positive relationship between nice parks and property values. They also saw a relationship between good parks and reduction of petty crime. The police have the broken window theory that we've all heard. The parks should have a tall grass theory. It would apply appropriately. If the council decides to go ahead with a plan for additional funds for the parks, I believe there would be wide support for that action. However, I have 3 humble suggestions that I've picked up from the people I've talked to as I've talked to them over these discussions. The first suggestion is separate all connections with the water bill. You know, and I know, there is no impact on the water bill, on the water rate, etc. But I repeat, there is no connection. But it takes the first 10 minutes of any conversation with a citizen in this town to convince them that there is no connection. And then they're still not quite sure that there isn't somewhere, somehow. The water, incidentally, is a sacred thing in this town. I mean, it goes back, our first amendment to our charter had to do with the water system. So don't mess around with that too much, and you're not suggesting that you would. But don't try to save a few pennies by including a parks bill with a water bill. You will live to regret that, I assure you. The second suggestion, be reasonable in this request for park funds. The park board suggested increments of $2, $4, $6, and $8, I believe. At the $2 benchmark, it would double the resources that the parks now have. At the $4, it would double again, and so on. I don't know how many agencies have had their budgets doubled in one swoop. So the suggestion I have, and carrying it from other people, be reasonable with this parks request. And finally, the third suggestion, and it comes out almost as a demand, let the people vote on it. Whatever you decide. You can play dangerous semantic games with calling it a fee or calling it a tax. As a fee, as you know, the council can order the funding with no vote. If it is a tax, I believe the vote would be mandatory, but call it what you like. In either case, let the people vote on it. There are some that say, well, it'd be just an advisory vote. Well, ladies and gentlemen, isn't that what every vote is an advisory to an organizational body? And that's what this would be, an advisory vote. Some say that, why would you want to go to the expense of a special election? Well, I would say don't go to a special election. Put it on the ballot at a general election. There would maybe, the cost would be much less. So in conclusion, if the parks need additional funding, and I believe they do, take away the water bill connection, prepare a reasonable request, and I think you will get a positive reaction from the Kaiser citizens. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions for Dr. McGee? Thank you so much.
Yes.
Eric Howell is, huh? All right, he's catching up. And then David Loudon, you're on deck. Or would you like to speak at the end as part of the Parks Board? At the end? Okay.
So Eric, before you start, I want to know, are you going to quote yourself in the article you're actually writing? So.
And then Hans Schneider's on deck, just to let you know. Eric,
Good evening, Madam Mayor and Council. My name is Eric Holland, and I live in Kaiser. Given that there are a huge number of people in this room who know me in another capacity, I want to make clear that my comments tonight are only my own and no reflection of other things that I perform around the community. And given that, I actually want to talk more about my experience in Kaiser Parks. Roughly 13 years ago in 6 months, my wife and I took possession of our house in Kaiser and had our daughter within the same 6-hour period. At the time, my wife worked as a retail manager, and it meant a lot of nights and weekends alone with my daughter. I clung to my sanity as a result of parks. Now, the caveat to that is, I didn't spend a whole lot of time in Kaiser Parks because unless we wanted to go to the same Rotary surplus play structure in 7 different locations around town, there wasn't a lot of variety there. We wouldn't use a lot of school parks. I would take her up to McMinnville in their Discovery Park. We'd go to Portland when I needed to just drive for a while. And my comments here are really just this. There are people out there and parents out there in this community right now, tonight, who are doing the exact same thing I was doing, 7, 8 years ago. And I would really hope that you can consider them when you're taking action on this. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Any questions for Mr. Howell? Thank you so much. Mr. Hans Schneider? Come on up. And on deck, we have Gary Whalen, and I'm going to offer your Parks Board. Where's Gary? Where is he? You're hiding back there. Okay, Gary, you can speak either with the Parks Board or on your own after Hans, okay?
Good evening, City Council. I've been involved with
If you just state your name and city of residence for the record.
Hans Schneider, and I am a resident of Kaiser.
Thank you.
Was involved in the implementing, we're putting in the sand volleyball courts at Kaiser Rapids Park. And I don't view this as a fee or a tax, but as an investment in our community and also for the youth of Kaiser. And I was down at the courts earlier today just to see, and we had about 15 kids out there playing sand volleyball. It gives them an opportunity to get off the streets, do something recreational, and it's very positive. So my vote is for implementing this fee or tax, whatever you want to call it, or investment in our community.
All right, thank you so much. Any questions? Councilor Ryan.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I've had the pleasure of working with you with volleyball, and you have, I want to say thank you, first of all, to your time commitment to the kids and the programs that we've had. They are over many, many years, and I know it's a long list. But, you know, not only did you do the volleyball stands, I know we're looking at future projects with the volleyball and your passion and commitment and the amount of money that you've put in of your own investment. I want to say thank you just on behalf of all the kids' sports teams that just really utilized that and really, really needed it. And so thank you for your time and investment.
Thank you.
All right, absolutely. Thank you so much. Gary, come on down. And on deck, I have Mark Reese.
Thank you. Just to clarify, Madam Mayor, I am not on the Parks Board, and I haven't been for about 4 years.
You know, just old habits die hard.
And that's why they're getting so much more done. So, anyhow, my name is Gary Whalen. I'm a Kaiser resident. A little background that shapes my comments here tonight. I've had the opportunity to serve as a member of the Parks Advisory Board for about 8 to 10 years. The subject of better parks funding has been a topic many times, and I applaud the current board for bringing this here tonight. Solid, predictable funding for maintenance and operations is critical, and Kaiser Parks are currently on life support. Good parks enhance a community and property values throughout Kaiser. Conceptually, I support a parks fee system. However, attention must be paid to the details of this cost to the property owners. Whether this is called a tax, a fee, or any other descriptor, there is only one revenue source, and it's all of us here. I hope there will be additional details spelled out before a fee is created and/or implemented. A discounted rate for seniors and low-income families is appropriate. How will these be identified? Most multifamily units from duplex on up only receive one bill, so how will a property owner or a manager excuse me, claim one of the proposed exceptions or discounts to which they are entitled? And will this information be gathered and put in place prior to the implementation? Otherwise, are you going to rebate if someone comes in after the fact? Could be very costly. Currently, the council directs a minimum of 2.5% annually from the general fund budget to parks. There have been times when parks has received slightly more. However, none of this is guaranteed. If this fee is enacted, there should be wording to the ordinance that simply states this general fund monies would continue, and if they are decreased or diminished, the fee is reduced at the same level. An example would be, say, Parks General Fund goes, and with respect to Chris who was talking percentages, I'm just using numbers because it's easier for me to visualize. Say the Park General Fund goes from 300,000 to 150, which is a 50% reduction. Then the parks fee would also be reduced by 50%. This type of wording would not stop a future council from a new ordinance. However, it may cause them to think twice before using any of the general funds to backfill other programs or projects. Because of statewide measures, increasing property taxes is prohibited. So fees is the new way local governments throughout Oregon are looking to increase revenues. The next fee for police services looks like it's close on the heels of this. And while both are probably needed and wanted, past and current city councils have, in my opinion, been more fiscally responsible than many other elected local officials. and Kaiser should be applauded for that. They've been a very fiscally responsible group of elected officials and city managers and those that help make those decisions. So this is an opportunity to lead the way in providing assurances to our citizens that you respect our wishes and will do the right thing. Again, I clearly understand the critical need for parks funding that, if properly structured, will benefit our whole community. Any questions?
Any questions for Mr. Whalen? All right, thank you so much. We appreciate your comments. I've got Mark Reese. Okay, you're going to pass. Glasses. Jesse Borghese. Okay, and on deck I have Connie McCarthy. You're going to pass? Okay. On deck then I've got Eleanor Koski. Okay.
My name's Jesse Borghese. I'm a citizen of Salem. I am the treasurer of the Salem Rugby Club. We have a men's club, we also have a women's club, and we have a high school club. Our high school team won state last year. Our men's team won the Pacific Northwest League 2 years ago. We'd like to think that we're in a real up-and-coming club in the Pacific Northwest, and we'd like to become a national powerhouse at some point in the future. We're a 501c3 nonprofit. We typically play most of our matches at Claggett Creek Park, and we try to run our high school boys first, and then with the women next if they have a match, then finally the men's. The staff at the Parks Department, I just want to say, are excellent. They're extremely easy to work with, and we do have limited parks that we can play at, and these guys make it real easy. It's fairly inexpensive for us as a nonprofit with a limited budget. They do very, very well with the fees that they charge us, and they're very, very accommodating. I think one of the problems that we cause when we play at Claggett Creek Park is the parking, and with the high school boys playing, all the parents show up from both teams, and they start overflowing into the neighborhood as far as the parking. Anything that supports the staff and the Parks Department, we're in favor of. And on top of that, we are very interested in working with the City of Kaiser and the Parks Department to improve the facilities at Claggett Creek Park. We're very interested in making that our home pitch, and we hope at some point we could enter into discussions in talking and doing so.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mr. Lawyer, did you get his contact information for future, talking about facilities? Oh, I'm sorry, we do have one question, and that would be Councilor Herrera. Sorry. Okay.
Yes, sir.
I was just curious, why did you initially pick Claggett Creek Park as your home base or whatever?
Yeah, so there's a couple of reasons. I think we do work with Salem, the City of Salem, as well as the City of Independence, as far as contracting with fields for our matches. The City of Salem has become more and more accommodating for us. However, it's taken a while for us to develop that relationship with them. But the City of Kaiser, for instance, we had 3 home matches this spring season. The first one we felt caused more damage than we would have liked to the field. So the next match that we were contracted to be there for, we decided not to be there. We went out to Independence because we didn't want to cause any further damage. So when I called the City of Kaiser, Allison there, I explained the situation. I said, we don't want to cause any further damage to the field. It needs time to rehabilitate. And she said, thank you, we appreciate that. And I said, is there any way that we can get a refund? And the answer was no, which I understood. And I said, was there any way we can get a credit? And she said, absolutely. We know you guys are coming back, so we're happy to work with you on that. And we were very happy with that response. So I guess I don't know if I'm answering your question, but really, you guys, City of Kaiser is extremely easy to work with, and for us, that just makes all the difference in the world, because we're all working people. I'm a banker in town, and I have a very busy schedule, and it's very limited hassle with the City of Kaiser.
Thank you. That's a nice compliment to our Parks Department. We do have less people to work with here, so it's easier, Robert. That's good to hear, though.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And then Councilor Ryan had a question?
I do.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So I appreciate the compliments to all of our city park staff. Do you realize we have one? We have one staff?
1.9.
Yeah, well, in the summer, right, in the seasonal, so they
Yeah.
do, we really do a great job of course, utilizing him. He does a great job for us, but it's volunteers like yourself who take the pride and the time, so I really appreciate that. And I wanted you to know, we're working on a sports roundtable conversation for our parks, and that's a follow-up conversation we've been working on for quite a while, but since Matt has your name and number, I'd like to include you in that, and other coaches that you might be aware of that could bring to the table on that, and let's talk about the future of our sports in Kaiser, because I think that's really important.
Absolutely.
So, thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, and thank you for the work you do with our young people to keep them very constructively and healthily occupied.
Yes, ma'am.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Eleanor Koski? I think I'm going to pass. You're going to pass? Okay. Well, thank you for being here tonight. And Rhonda. Rhonda Rich. And then on deck we have Angie Kuda, if I wrote that correctly.
Good evening. My name is Rhonda Rich, and I live in the city of Kaiser, and I'm speaking for myself. For those who know, I'm associated with another group. I just need to say a few things off the top here, kind of get them off my chest. I've been involved with parks since Kaiser Rapids was initiated. And at that time, we saw a huge park coming in to the area, and we wondered, how are we going to maintain this? And we were assured that funds from Kaiser Station were going to help fund that. So I don't know where that's at, but I just had to bring that out, that it seems like some of that funding should have been increased at Kaiser Station. And then just recently, through the years, you think, okay, well, property taxes do go up. We are assessed, things do go up. Thought that would help cover the park's expenses. Understand the PERS increase has taken 17% over the next 3 years, has taken quite a bit of that money that we could possibly use for the general budget. So I don't want to step on anybody's toes. I like the staff here, but that's a little disconcerting that we do have an increase, but we can't use it for running the city. I'd like to say that parks are, to me, very important personally. They're green spaces that we don't want to give up, especially if we expand the urban growth boundary, we move out farther, we want to keep green spaces in our city. We're doing more infill. It's more important to have places for people to go and enjoy, the lawns, the play equipment. So I am very supportive of parks, and I understand over the years I've been to many parks board meetings, and I understand a lot of the issues, the funding. I just want to say I've got about four points here. I just kind of want to go through because it kind of addresses some of the questions that were presented in this document. I believe I'm not supportive of increasing fees or taxes, or like some people said, that it is an increase out of my pocket that I would have to pay. To support the parks, though, I think they're important enough personally that I filled out the survey. I'm willing to pay $2 a month extra. And they keep their money in the general fund. That would double their fund, which to me sounds like a lot of money to double any fund in any of the budget. I would be supportive of this, and that this is revisited after a year of collecting the money. I don't feel comfortable in having an incremental over 4 years of going up to $8 And a lot of the people in the survey did not go to that. In fact, the weighted average was about $4. The way to collect this, I feel that it should be collected annually. I don't want to see administrative costs take over a lot of the funds that you're going to be collecting. I think it should be billed to the property owner. I think if you try to collect from renters and you're not attaching it to the water bill, and like was mentioned, it really has nothing to do with the water. That right now, property taxes pay for the parks. So I think that kind of keeps it in line with keeping it with the property owner. I have a renter, and if he doesn't pay the parks fee, it'll probably be a lien against my property, so I might as well pay it up front anyway. So I wouldn't mind that. Separate billing annually. People who want to give more, they can give more than the $2 a month. So it'd be $24 annually. Let's see, I would like to see, I think it should be, I don't want to see a can of worms open here on low income, senior living, whatnot. I think if you assess the property owners, you have a duplex, you get billed $2 per unit. I think as senior living, you should eliminate the assisted or rehab living because those people are not going to use the park. And also this fee should only be used for maintenance, repairs, or replacement, not for new amenities. Examples are the skate park. I understand that's going to be a couple $100,000 at least, and it should be probably redone, that patching it is not going to make it safe for the kids. The safety issues have to be addressed. Those things should be taken care of first.
All right.
Okay, all the safety issues.
The
And
maintenance and safety
Yes,
All right.
and replacement.
and replacement of the existing amenities.
Yes, and no improvements until, if it takes 2 or 3 years to improve, to do those things, then that's what we need to do.
All right. Does anybody have any questions for Rhonda Rich? Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts. Really appreciate it.
Thanks.
And Angie Kuda? All right. Thank you for being here tonight. We appreciate that. That takes us to Mr. Alan Barker. And then Daniel Miedema is on deck.
Alan Barker, City of Kaiser, and I was on the Budget Committee this last couple of years. I have some questions, some statements that I think we're going to need some input back from the staff at this point because there's some people here that have some misunderstandings. The Kaiser budget right now does not support the parks at the level it needs to be done. Citizens and many of you guys here are out mowing the lawns to maintain our parks. Citizens themselves have maintained the parks. We've got one staff member. The reason we're asking for money is because we don't have it. Our parks are deteriorating. Just simply doubling the funds right now is not going to cut it. I like the idea of citizen involvement, whether it be by vote or anything like that, because the citizens need to understand and they need to make an input as to what's going on here. I'm concerned about if we take it to a general election vote, are we going to be required to have a 50% turnout of the voters being positive to pass something for an increase to make this fee or tax happen? If we propose it like that, do we need 51% of the people to say, yes, we want this to take place? I don't know. Question for after my time is done.
I'm keeping track.
Okay. I like the idea of an annual payment system by the property owners. It's going to reduce a lot of the stress and the administrative stuff. I think that was a great idea. I think that staff needs to address to people tonight that the expenses that are brought on by outside forces from Kaiser, because our taxes, by any increase in taxes to the property owners in Kaiser, is not going to cut anywhere. It's not going to improve what's going on with the budget for what we have in our town. regardless whether it be the police department or the parks or anything else. It's not going to cut it because we have outside forces such as PERS eating up more than we're going to gain in property tax increases of 3% that we're allowed to take. Am I correct? Right now, we're looking at a 17% increase or higher from PERS expenses. Our expenses from outside of our control is going to far outpace anything we get in property tax increases of our limitations of 3%. Am I right? Okay,
Yes,
go
you're
ahead.
correct.
Okay? So, from those are my big concerns. I like the idea that of an annual. I think that was a great idea, but $2 isn't going to cut it, folks. Just simply doubling what we have now is not going to cut it. I realize that we have people who are not going to be able to afford to make more than $2 contributions. Personally, I can afford to pay the $8. I understand that folks can't. There's been great consideration and great input by what Bill Lawyer has put in with considerations for those that can't pay. Great ideas. Eric brought up the idea of a variety. We need to have a good variety in our parks. We need to be able to utilize all of our parks throughout our town. Not just one. I mean, we typically go to either the one that's close by me or the dog park, Kaiser Rapids Park. That's where we spend most of our time. But yeah, it's getting stale. We need more variety. When we did the budget committee 2 years ago, we were handed a little slip of paper that had priorities of each one of us on the budget committee. What do we see? What do we feel that our citizens have as concerns as priorities in town? And everybody has expressed here, if we have extra money, it should go to police department. Those are the highest two priorities on the budget committee. The guys who put this questionnaire together, you guys did a great job. Only one item was higher than a 4. You guys addressed everything that's a concern to the citizens. You did a great job on that. Bathrooms was the highest. It had a little over a 4. Everything else that you guys addressed on here was a great concern of everybody that partook in this survey. So my hat's off to you guys. Other than that, you got your hands full. You've had some great input from the citizens and the staff. Good luck.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Barker? And thank you for being part of the Budget Committee this year. We appreciate your service. We have
Madam
got Daniel Miedema, and then I'll be asking folks if they want to, if they didn't get a chance to sign in, if they want to speak. Of your name, city of residence, and you have 5 minutes.
My name is Daniel Miedema. I'm a resident of Kaiser.
Oh, okay. Shannon, do you have a question?
No, I was hoping I had an answer. But
Oh, yes, there was
Mr.
a
Barker had a
question.
question at the initial part of that. And,
Sorry.
And the answer to that is no, it does not need a double majority vote for that type of question. So I won't go into all the boring details for you. But
Okay, there's the answer.
Awesome.
Thank you.
So I'm not as prepared as a lot of the other people. I just kind of did this on a whim. So I guess I just wanted to say.
And
that-
a name and city of
Oh,
residence.
Daniel Miedema, Kaiser.
Thank you.
Sorry. Yes, so I just kind of decided on a whim that I was going to speak. I guess I would say that I go to the park a lot. Pretty much every weekend I am attending some type of park with my daughter. We usually go and play for a good chunk of the day, and it's a lot of fun. With that said, like, it's great, and I think that upkeep is very important, and maintaining and keeping everything functioning and safe is of great importance. And I think with that kind of, the idea of a community and a city, and that is to share financial responsibilities and burdens that otherwise I couldn't cover myself. I couldn't have an awesome park like Kaiser Rapids in my backyard. My backyard's not quite big enough, nor could I afford some of the really cool toys. And so I think, everybody could find something in the budget that they don't exactly want to spend money on, or things are allocated in ways that they don't exactly agree with 100%. and I'm sure I could too. I was actually looking through trying to find something, but there's 190 pages in this thing, and I skimmed it probably far too quickly to find anything of note. So, with that said, I would say I strongly support the fee. Anything that keeps the parks up and running in good shape so that I get to go play on them and get to be a kid again, in my mind is fantastic. I have a ton of fun. My daughter has a ton of fun. She makes all new friends just about every day we go there. And it's been great. And so I guess, yeah, I would just say, however the fees are collected, I will leave that up to the people who are much better at knowing how to do that efficiently than I am. And so I would leave that up to you guys to do whatever is deemed to be the most efficient, whether it be a fee or tax or yearly fee or part of the water bill, whatever I think in my mind gets the most funds directly to where they need to go, I think would be the best route to take. And so I guess with that, I will end my rambling.
All right. Thank you so much. Any questions for Daniel? Thank you so much, and I hope you have many more fun sunny days like today with your daughter in the park.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, thank you. Is there anybody else who would like to come on down? Daryl, why don't you come on down? And just state your name and city of residence for the record.
My name is Daryl Richardson. I live in Kaiser. I'm sorry I'm late. I've been over at Sunset Park doing a little work. But I'm not opposed to, about the budget or, the fees that you're imposing. But how far are they going to go? Are they going to go from 8 to 10 to 12 to 14 and on up? Or are they going to stop at $8? Is going to be the maximum fee that the parks are going to have? I'm throwing that out. Is it a yay or a nay or?
The recommendation by the Parks Board was a fee in some increment between $2 and $8.
Right.
So not more than that, yeah.
Not more than $8 at the max.
That is their recommendation, and if the council chose to impose that as a maximum, they could write the ordinance that way.
Okay, thank you, Chris. Rhonda has a good idea about collecting the fees annually, and I think that's a great idea, because then the money's going to be there year by year by year. And once this passes, I would like to see a couple things that I brought up last year and quite a few years back. One is no smoking in the park. I live next door to a park. People come down there and smoke cigars, and it comes right into my free space. And we don't have smoking in here. We don't have it outside the door. So why should we have it in the park? That's a big concern of mine. I mow the park. I run over cigarette butts, cigar butts, and everything else. And I'm going to keep doing it whether you say the smoking's going to keep going on in the parks or not. The other thing I brought up about 8 years ago, why don't the citizens adopt a park like you adopt a highway? I've got my park right now that I adopted 35 years ago, and I'm still working at it. But it's just the idea that it would kind of say, hey, thank you for doing what you do by having your name out there saying, I adopted this park. And it would be, you don't have to change the name, adopt the park. You just have to change the name below when somebody doesn't want to mow anymore or take care of the park. So that's my other idea. And then about the RVs that I suggested. So that would really pay for the parks. Have you got any questions?
All right. Any questions for Mr. Richardson? Councilor Ryan.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you for your testimony. The Adopt the Park program was talked about in at great length, and I thought it was a great idea since I brought it up. But I like the idea of the businesses in the local community really stepping up. And so what I just like to say is it didn't go very far because of the budget amounts we were talking about, in all honesty. And we already have so many awesome volunteers who step up. It's real hard to share that responsibility and expect it. But what I'd like to do is, if you'd like to keep in touch with me, it's something that we are working on. We haven't put it away. We're still discussing it and getting people involved. And I mean, I know you take a lot of pride in your own park, but there are other people and other businesses that could do the same. And so it is a great idea, and I think it's something that we want to continue to discuss after we got through the budget process. So please feel free to contact me, and we can keep talking about it, and I can let you know what we decide as a group to implement that.
So how much do you think that's going to cost?
Well, sir, my recommendation in the beginning really wasn't so much cost, it was having businesses maybe larger businesses take kind of larger parks, and they could take pride and put their name up as a business and say, to help pick up the garbage, or does it need a bench, or, kind of go and be a part of the park and do their, picnics there for a company, things like that, where they were taking a lot of pride in the park and not just really it wasn't necessarily a dollar amount we talked about, it was more about getting the community involved in our parks and taking that pride to the same pride you have. So,
Well, how many citizens do you think that would know about adopting a park unless you put a sign up or unless you did some advertising? Because I think a lot of people are going to step up and really help out if they know they can adopt a park.
I agree.
Well, part of the conversation, though, has been we have phenomenal volunteers who give tremendous amounts of time, and we have a lot of parents who are commuting 2 hours a day, and just getting here, getting back, getting their kids put to bed, and then getting up and doing it the next day. So being able to go out and do that work when you've got kids in the home becomes very problematic. So it was very clear on the survey that the vast majority of people said, I'll pay the $2 or $4. It's much easier to write that check and say, I will just do that. I'll know the park will be taken care of, and then I can get homework done, get the baths done, and get the kids off to school or soccer on Saturday. As part of sharing, we've got dedicated volunteers. We have dedicated community members who give in so many different ways that the parks belong to all of us. And what really was the impetus behind this was yes, there are opportunities to do a project, but for long-term maintenance, the conversation was entered into because this has to be sustainable after we're gone.
Okay, I just think I drive down the highway belongs to me, it belongs to everybody, but they have adopted highway, and then you see somebody's name, and you say, hey, to yourself, hey, thank you for taking care of this piece of highway. So that's all I'm saying is let people, and it's not everybody has kids, or there's a lot of senior citizens out here that would step up if they know that they can go in and help out. You know what? Really, I've talked to quite a few that come down to Sunset and they say, oh, what can I do? And I say, well, pick up some branches, do anything. But people want to get involved.
We absolutely do. And that is a very welcome, and it's a key part of our community, absolutely. And the conversation we're having here is not designed to supplant or to eliminate volunteerism, but to enhance so that people have opportunities to come in, do what they can when they can, but know that the park will be ready for them. So even though we appreciate the work you've done in Sunset Park year after year to make sure that's a beautiful space.
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Yes. Councilor Herrera has a question for you, sir.
First of all, Daryl, thank you for all you've done, and I tell you that park
Very welcome.
would not be the same without the work of many, but you first. And I think that's a great idea. I also thought of that too, adopt the park. But I think that people can still do their thing. I mean, I live by a park and I do as much as I can, And I think that our community will just go out and do that. And I agree with the mayor. You can't really. I know when I get sick or something like that, or when I'm gone on vacation, I come back and it's double or whatever. I think it's quite a commitment, but I think people will do it on their own in Kaiser, because I know every park's got I call them the park nerds like you and I, Daryl.
Yeah.
So we enjoy doing that, and I think it'll still happen, but there's no question we need to come up with some kind of additional help.
Well, I'd like to see you move on with that idea. Thank you very much.
Any other questions? Thank you so much. We appreciate it. Would anybody else like to come on down? Mr. Taylor?
Minutes is never enough.
Your name's not Walsh.
Yeah, thank you. My name's
Timer's
Jim.
up.
My name's Jim Taylor. I've been a resident of Kaiser for 69 years and 51 weeks. So next week's my birthday. Everybody always knows because they have a big parade on River Road for me every year. What's the last name? On a serious note, I don't want to go over a lot of things that people have talked about. I appreciated everybody that's come tonight, and I'd like to thank you for your extra meeting and staff. All of you put in a lot of work on this also, especially the mayor and Councilor Ryan. I always like to say that parks is a reflection of the health of your community, and you've all heard me say that. And right now, the health of our community is starting to suffer for reasons beyond our control, which are PERS, property taxes capped at 3% a year, insurance, things that we cannot control. So for that reason, that is the reason the Parks Board went on this journey to find out how the people of Kaiser felt about implementing some sort of a fee. So now that comes to, now we've turned it over to council. My experience taught me that council does three things. Number one, you have the information. You are elected to do all the things that the other people don't want to do. They don't. People have, they're busy. They don't have time to go over a 150-page packet. They don't have time to learn everything about SDCs and where you can spend that money and the new money and the old money. But you all are charged to do that. And that is appreciated. And it takes a lot of time. Secondly, you manage change. Everybody hates change. But there is change, and you are directed to somehow mitigate any possible bad effect that change makes. Now, we all remember Kaiser Rapids. That was going to ruin everything. We remember Area C. That was a root canal. And that was going to ruin everything. Kaiser Station, the same thing. But elected officials managed that change and mitigated any bad things that these have turned into very good projects. Thirdly, you take care of the people's money. It's not your money. It's the taxpayers' money. And they entrust in you to make the decisions how to spend their money. Now, my years on council, and I know all 7 of you, even though Marlene's back east, are very careful about that. And I think we're lucky as citizens to know that our elected officials care about how you spend and manage their money. So that brings us to the issue tonight. You are asked to decide whether to spend the taxpayers' money. Now, you have to decide, is it dire if we don't? Or if we do, will it improve people's lives? As a member of the Parks Board, I'm on board as saying that I think it will improve people's lives, and we've reached a point with our low tax base that we cannot continue to maintain our parks in a safe manner. And I've heard a lot of that tonight, and so I would ask you to show that courage. And it's going to take courage. It's a hard decision, So I would thank you for your time, and God bless you, and think about this hard. So, any questions?
Thank you very much. Any questions for Mr. Taylor? All right. Thank you so much. Anybody else who would like to add their voice to the conversation tonight? Come on down. Just your name and city of residence for the record.
My name is Davis Dyer. I'm a Kaiser resident.
You have 5 minutes.
Reading over this report, and given that we have, as a city, chosen to create parks, it is the responsibility of everybody in the city to maintain those parks. And therefore, I see the $2 fee as basic maintenance. That's what the description, how the description reads to me. Anything above that is giving us the opportunity to expand, whether it be expand the number of parks or expand the amenities offered within any one of the parks. And so, based on that, I would recommend that the city adopt the $2 fee as a mandatory that everybody pays, and then give those who would like to do so add $2, $4, or $6. And based on the number of on our reputation as a city really high on volunteerism, my guess is that you would have a sizable number of people giving more than the $2. Although it wouldn't be guaranteed, you would at least be guaranteed enough money to maintain the parks as we are required to do.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much. Any questions for Mr. Dyer? Thank you. I really appreciate your input. Is there anybody else who would like to have their voice heard tonight? I'll let you back clean up. All right. Is there any final comments from the Parks Board, kind of to wrap up some of the things we've heard? Come on down.
That's it. Laugh at me. My name's David Lau. That's the only chance they get because I'm chairman of the Parks Board and I can shut them up. So, I live in Kaiser. I've lived in Kaiser since I was 6 years old, so I'm not quite as long as Jim. That only makes it about 56 years. Anyway, listening to the comments tonight, especially at the $2 level, our parks are getting to the point where we're going to shut off the sprinklers and not mow the lawns. We're not going to replace or repair any of the play structures. The Parks Board has taken their money in the last 3 years. We put $20,000 in 2 years into the Little League Park to rehab it. And we took our entire budget this year to put it in the skate park just to make it safe. It's one of the largest used skate parks in the area. I personally mow the grass at the Big Toy. I rake the chips, and that's an endless job because as soon as you're done with the swings, there's holes again. Yes, and we have been fortunate enough to leverage the price of the property and some of the SCDs, and we're going to be replacing that with poured-in-place rubber. We're going to put in bathrooms, and we're going to make a path around the park, which is all in the master plan. So, being as that bathrooms are high on the priority list, they're very expensive things to do, especially at Kaiser Rapids. We have to put an entire septic system in out there. $2 isn't going to maintain the parks. $4 would be better. If we get more money, then we can leverage the existing STDs to put more amenities. I know, they're complicated. Old money. We're almost out of the old money, so that argument's going to go away. But we can finish Kaiser Rapids parks. We can finish all the other things scheduled for all of the other parks. all the things that the people want. More walking paths, more bathrooms, more play structures, more sports courts, whatever they want. Well, not whatever they want, within reason. So I just don't see $2 making that, and especially no fee is going to make that, just to do the maintenance. Like it's brought up, Claggett Creek. We doubled the price of the repair because we couldn't afford it. It went from $7,000 to $15,000. We managed to save the tennis courts at Willamette Manor Park, and that cost $11,000. And we made it into a multi-use court. Now you can play pickleball, but I'm not quite sure what that is. But apparently it's really big among old people, and since I'm getting that age, I should find out.
We'll look that up.
Yes, we will. It's some kind of weird thing, badminton, and I don't know.
I thought it was pickles.
Well, I thought so too, but it's not. Maybe Robert knows. I don't. So as a Parks Board, we've been talking about this for a long time. We put a lot of effort in. I thought we were coming to blows at times, and we worked hard on this and rewarded it many times to try to get what the people wanted in some kind of logical fashion so they could understand it. So we gave them a history. And I hope that you will seriously consider our work, or we'll just go back to the drawing board and we'll try again.
Any questions for Mr. Loudon? Thank you so much for your leadership and for the teamwork of the Parks Board and having some very, very challenging conversations about a very important topic. We appreciate your work.
Thank you.
All right, thank you so much. If we let you back up, anybody else who wants a second bite at the apple is going to have at it too. So we could be here for a good long time. So what I'm hoping to do is, in our discussion here, answer questions that come up. We're going to address the questions that were laid out in the staff report and put together a recommendation based on the answers to those questions, give guidance to our staff about what we would like to see come forward. So I think that's the plan to go from here. So the first thing I would like to tackle is, it was not an open public, this is a forum, this is public testimony. So, yeah, I'd like to invite more people up, and unlike a public hearing, yeah, everybody have to cycle back through, but I think it's a good time. It's almost 7:30 to go ahead and engage in the conversation based on what we've heard, based on what we've read in the park survey, the things that we have learned through this process, and come up with a format for moving forward. The one thing I want to read first to start this conversation is this. Oh, before I do that. We did get a letter from Mr. Ted Plum, who is a resident of Kaiser, and he did give us some written feedback, which will also be put into the record as well. Should I read it in? So it'll be available for anybody who wants to read it online, and it'll be given to the Kaiser Times as well. And I appreciate, Mr. Plum, you taking the time to send in your written testimony for tonight. Kaiser's mission statement: to keep city government costs and services to a minimum by providing city services to the community in a coordinated, efficient, and least cost fashion. Sometimes people look at least cost as cheap, but anybody who has ever owned a home or rented an apartment or something knows that cheap and least cost, effective use of your dollars is not necessarily the same thing. And I'm really proud of our city for taking the dollars that are entrusted to us to manage for the benefit of all the people of Kaiser to make sure we get the best value, both short-term, but more importantly, long-term for the people who are here and our future generations. So I just wanted to start the conversation with that. We've been asked to consider some decision points, and really the first decision point is whether or not we would consider doing a fee. So we can either do this by consensus or by motion. And I'm looking to city attorney, is there a preference on how you would like us to proceed on that?
Madam Mayor, with regard to, I assume, Bill's questions
Yes.
on the first page, you do not need to have a vote on each one, but consensus means there's no objection, so there needs to be no objection each time you ask the question. And if you confirm that, you can go to the next one. If anybody objects, then it needs to be by motion.
All right. Everybody clear? Councilor Ryan? I'm not clear, sorry. Microphone.
So I just wanted to have you maybe cover that one more time. So you're going to go over each proposed point from the staff and discuss it and then move forward from each point? Is that your?
Yes, that's the framework, yes.
Thank you, I'm sorry, thank you.
Because I think they really covered the main points that we heard from people tonight, the concerns that people have, what they're looking for, and that's going to be some of our touch points, and then we can add things that we believe we've heard that are going to be important to include in any sort of structure.
And then will there be a point of discussion at the end or
We're going to
during,
discuss
at
each point.
each point?
Yeah,
Thank you.
that's my plan. Councilor Anderson?
Okay, question from my standpoint then. So this is so we're going to look at, kind of go by these one by one here. And so the very first one, enacting a fee, that would be as opposed to referring that out for a vote?
No, enacting, I guess there is more than a yes or a no. Okay, so the question would be, well, first of all, are we interested in a fee? Because a fee can be referred or not referred, so that would be a second question. So whether or not we're going to even consider a fee, and then we would have the discussion about whether it be referred or if it would be just enacted and have the conversation about the costs and benefits to that. Are you good with that? Does that kind of clarify? Councilor Herrera?
The first question is a threshold question. Yes or no on a fee?
Yeah, well.
Yeah.
And then after that,
No. No, it isn't. Your question says, should the city council enact a fee?
Enact a fee.
That's
Ah,
different than
okay.
referring it out to a vote of the people.
Yeah.
So
no, that's true. That's true. That's true.
All
That's
right.
true.
That's
So
why I asked the question.
Perhaps the word establish, or should we even talk about doing this? I guess it's the threshold question.
Not trying to be complicated, just trying to understand things, that's all.
Councilor Herrera?
Yeah, before we go any further, I want to make sure that, you know, I appreciate everything I've heard tonight, and I jotted a few notes, and in talking to people, the number one thing that came up, and everybody says we know we have this issue, we need money for our parks, but the consensus from my standpoint seems to be something along the lines with Mr. McGee. While I think, you know, myself, I would go for a fee or whatever, but when I listen to people, they want to have a vote. That's what I've heard over and over. And before I go forward with this, I want to make sure that that's understood, because from what I've heard from the people I talk to, that's the number one thing there. And I've heard a lot of interesting things. We all know it's the parks, we all are for them, and it's good for our health, for our families and everything, community. But how we get there is not quite, I'm not quite, you know, and I think I appreciate the work, because I was there firsthand with watching the Parks Board, and they're amazing. But for listening to people again, before we go to that first question, I mean, I myself would like to, but I want to reflect on what people tell me. And the number one thing they tell me is they would like to see it a vote. I don't know what that would cost, what the take is, and I don't know if I should move any further on that first question, because from what I've heard, 95% of the people say, I would like to do something, but I think people should vote on it.
Okay.
And that's the consensus I've gotten, so that's where I'm coming from, so. But I appreciate everybody's, I myself, I'm all for it, and I don't care how we get there. We need money for our parks, that's me. But I'm talking about what I'm listening to people out there. So before we go on, I just want to make sure you get that. Thank you.
Mr. Johnson?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just as a possible suggestion for council, do what you may with this, based on Councilor Anderson's noticing the way it actually reads. Just for purposes of kind of a decision tree method, if you change the word enact in that first one to just propose.
There we go.
And then your second question, I think, given the discussion of the council, should just be, assuming that you want to propose it in any fashion, vote or no, in that first go-around is yes, we want to propose something. Then probably the second one, up to council again, you can take it second or last, whatever you want, is because it isn't listed. is one of the questions in here, but it's obviously an issue for at least some of the council. Should it be by ordinance or by the ballot, by the vote? So, and that could be a second question if you wish.
Okay. Councilor Reed?
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. I just wanted a little bit of clarification as to all the ramifications of a vote. I mean, it sounds pretty simple to put it up to a vote, but what are we talking about in terms of process, general election versus special election, cost to put it on the ballot, whether it would be, how much that would dig into what we're trying to do here at all? So I just wanted a little bit of view from the other side of that.
Yeah, I apologize, but I'm not really prepared for a full discussion of that issue tonight. But whatever you do, please don't say that it sounds simple, because Tracy and I can tell you differently.
Well, that was my,
it's a pretty big deal. It does not need to go to a general election ballot. You will end up paying more if you have a special election, but it could be, and I don't think we realistically could meet the next election, Tracy, which is September, is that right? No. And in fact, I'm not sure even what date you could make it if you wanted to. It would be several months out. The deadline for that sort of thing it's quite a bit in advance of the ballot measure date.
Yes, and that was the purpose of my question, to point out that it's not simple and that there are lots of steps, and I was just wondering as to what those kinds of things were. So
Right.
I just wanted, I guess, to throw that out there that, you know, although it may sound simple to say throw it up for a vote, there are a lot more things involved with that we need to fully understand before we
In relation to a
embark on
cost,
that.
when you have a special election, basically it's the cost of running the election divided amongst the entities putting something on the ballot. The last time we participated in that, or looked at it anyway, it was going to cost around $25,000 to put an item on a ballot for a special election. So if you go off of the general election schedule, which is actually, the next general election where we wouldn't have to pay would be what? May 2018, so quite a ways away, would cost us around $25,000 to actually run that election. And then there are advantages and disadvantages both ways. You know, on a general election, you have a lot more items on the ballot for people to, you know, confuse with one another, as opposed to sort of one or two items for them to take a very close look at. On the other hand, you typically get bigger turnout at a general election than you do in a special election, and so there's a lot of things to weigh both ways with an election.
So before I go to the next person, I'm hearing a consensus that, yes, we want to have a conversation about a fee of some kind. And the conversation now is how we would go about enacting that fee. We haven't talked about the level yet. We haven't talked about the other caveats that people shared with us tonight. I think there's some pretty basic things that we're probably going to agree on pretty simply. But I'm not hearing anybody saying, no, let's keep it at 0, we're good. Am I interpreting that correctly? Okay, so that decision point then, by consensus, is that a fee is a necessary thing for our parks to propose. And now we're having the conversation about how would we go about proposing that, and then we need to have the conversation about how much. Okay, so back to the conversation about election versus an ordinance. Councilor Freeman, did you want to weigh in yet? I'm just kind of going down the line.
Well, I just want to clarify something that Chris said to make sure I heard you right, because I'm like really plugged up, so I probably didn't hear you right. But the special election you said was $25,000, but you put on the general election, there is no cost, or there still is a cost? There is no cost. No cost. Okay, perfect. Thank you.
And that would be a year from now?
A year from May.
2018.
I heard that right?
May of 2018.
Will be the next valid one. Okay, Councilor Ryan?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think my experience, and I do want to share a little bit about being on the task force with the Parks Committee in here shortly, but my experience was, I did hear a little bit of that, asking, you know, well, hey, did we talk about putting it on a ballot? But I also had the majority of the people I spoke with in the different areas did say they felt like they entrusted us as city council officials to do our job and be fiscally responsible for the money and to, take care of our parks. And so I kind of found the opposite of what Councilor Herrera found.
Okay. Fair enough. So knowing that if we're going to go to a special election, there'll be a $25,000-ish cost to go forward with that, to get that money, to go forward with that before a year is up. That would be another year of deferred maintenance on our parks. That would be another delay on instituting something between $2 and $8 per month per household, if that is the recommendation we go with. So the decision point now is that something that, a cost that we believe we need to incur for what I understand to be an advisory vote? Please correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Johnson, that can we enact that through the ballot, or would it still come back to the council to actually enact the ordinance?
The term advisory vote has been thrown around, and for many years, we've usually advised against an advisory vote, and for two reasons. One is the folks that support something, if it passes an advisory vote, there's going to be a lot of criticism if the council doesn't follow through with an advisory vote. And second, and maybe most importantly, is if you have an advisory vote and then you say, okay, a big chunk of the people said yes to this, so we're going to enact it. So you're enacting just an ordinance then. It's then subject to referendum. So you could end up with two ballots doing it that way. Basically, if you think it's a good idea, you just need to decide whether or not it's a good enough idea, or you feel you have enough support to just enact it, or if you want to send it to the ballot. And so similar to, I'm trying to remember which one it was.
The 911.
It was maybe the 911 one. I think we had one since then. You refer the ordinance. You pass it with all the details, and but
the
refer
marijuana.
it to the vote.
Good.
Would be my recommendation.
Yeah, the marijuana tax, we
Thank you.
referred. Yeah, we just did that.
Right.
And so we referred that.
That was the most recent one, correct.
And we were required to do so in order to be able to collect that.
In that
Was
particular one, we were required to do so because of the way the state law was worded, yes.
Okay. So given the, be either $25,000 or a year delay to be on the general ballot, that's the decision point then we're going to have to grapple with. The other decision point we're going to have to grapple with is the level of funding that we are going to request from people. We heard the concept of an annual fee, and we've also been talking, up until now, talking about monthly, which spreads the cost out over the year. So it's the same every month. So when I write my check, or, okay, I don't write checks anymore. I click on my computer. It's the same, it's consistent throughout the year. Some people like to spread the cost out through the year because they know what the costs are going to be. Some people like to pay it all at once. So these are a couple of issues we're going to have to grapple with. Yeah. Councilor Anderson.
Related question to that, the notion of an annual payment, would something along those lines be envisioned, like where we would send out a bill or somehow tag that on with, and we couldn't tag that onto like a county property tax bill or anything, right?
No, we cannot do that. It cannot go on the property tax. Property tax is only for property tax for all the entities that share that check that we write.
We would put a billing out.
Is there any way to determine how much an annual billing would cost
Well,
us?
Actually, there is, and
There
Tim
is.
has that number.
We have that information.
If you were going to do an annual billing where you mail it separately by itself, no connection at all to any other process we have in the city, an annual bill would cost you $9,278 roughly.
Right. There'll be a one-time cost of $9,278 to do an annual billing versus if it was combined on an existing bill that's already going out, what's the cost for that?
If you were to stuff it in with the existing utility bill or some other bill, that cost alone would just be paper, folding, stuffing. So just the incremental cost would be $1,467 on an annual basis.
Okay, and I would refer people to attachment 1 of the packet where these costs are broken out. Yes, Councilor Ryan.
Thank you. Would that amount be the exact same if we did it quarterly, just multiplied times 4?
Correct.
Thank you.
Okay. So if we do an annual or we do a monthly, that's going to make a difference on how that's, you're thinking about something. Yes, you are. Counselor Anderson?
I'm sorry,
I'm seeing the wheels turn.
I don't know if we can ask this, or if anyone can answer this question or not. I know, just in terms of other jurisdictions and water, notably the city of Portland has run into a few issues with respect to how they're able to use, amounts that maybe they're just taking money from their water fund and using it for non-water related issues. I mean, if we just include this as a item on the water bill, we're not,
I'm sorry, you
sorry.
need to step over there, okay?
Okay.
I can't talk to you while we're doing this. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, there are some jurisdictions that, this is not new. We're not plowing any new ground here statewide. There have been cities all over the state that have done fees. We have lots of cities that we're going to be able to go look at who have done this successfully. We are not the first out of the gate. So we have some that have, Portland may not be a good example.
Well, and what Councilor Anderson is talking about and in the news with Portland is that they spent money right out of their water fund from water rates. And it's not so much what's on the bill as where the fund is. So the line item on your bill that says the water rates, and ours is even stronger than other places because as former Councilor McGee mentioned, one of the first amendments to our charter was the water revenue amendment, which by charter says we can't use water revenues for anything but water. And but what that means is that line item on the bill for water rates, not the entire bill. So.
okay,
Yeah.
I appreciate that. I just wanted to clarify
Okay.
any possible restriction.
Counselor Reed?
Would it be correct to think that if we did do an annual billing that was separate, would that be in some way more flexible in terms of what people could contribute versus what was mandatory versus the tagging it to the water bill or something? It seems to me that that would be more flexible that way, but I don't know if I'm correct on that.
Well, from an administrative process, yes, we just have more room on the bill itself to put in donation lines or whatever we so choose. So we could customize the billing a little more than if we do include it on a water bill.
Okay, so that would, in a sense, if we were able to collect more through voluntary donations, that
Correct.
might recoup some of that $9,000 cost of the separate billing. So in that respect, it might, I mean, there's a lot of mights, I realize with that. But there's that's conceivable.
There is potential for that, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Counselor Ryan?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think I have concerns about increasing costs to the city to do an annual billing personally. Not that it's not a good idea or a bad idea. I know there has been some discussion of maybe even titling it something else monthly instead of a water bill so that there isn't the confusion. Maybe there's resources of, getting verbally challenged with helping people see that it's not part of the water bill, so there's no confusion versus spending $10,000 of where we're trying to, not continue to spend the money, we're trying to make up the money. So just my thought.
Counselor Reed?
Just kind of, I guess, along these lines, and I don't even know if this is relevant or not, but if we're talking $24 a year, would making it an even 25? Would that even be a reasonable thing to make up for those costs if we choose to do that, or is that even a reasonable?
Dollar per year.
Yeah, going from the 24 to the 25 to cover the mailing costs or
Sure,
the
you could
production
certainly
costs.
do that if you so choose.
Okay.
But then the money coming in would be not 100% for parks. There would be administrative cost associated with that. So I know it's $1, and we're talking, talking parks fees between $2 and $8. $24 a year up to $72. So I mean, that's the kind of dollars, hard dollars we're talking about. But we're also putting together a process that we haven't done before, and we want to make sure that we understand what the ramifications are. So the dollars, we have to face reality here, is $2 a month. And for the vast majority of people, 83% of the people who responded, they're going, yeah, let's just do this. On the survey, we heard from people tonight, support for taking care of our parks financially. And there's other ways that we can continue to foster volunteerism, et cetera, but at the end of the day, there's dollars involved. So I want to back up a little bit. So we've had some conversation about whether or not this needs to go to a vote. And now that we've heard what some of the costs, the timing, and so forth, is that a discussion we want to pursue at this time, or give ourselves the option of going forward? And then that could also happen next year as well, if we wanted, if the council chose after the first of the year, said we need to put this on the ballot to make sure we're still good, that option would be available and there'd be no charge. Or if they're going to propose an increase or something, or if people want to refer at that point. But if we say we're going to wait for a vote and not pay $25,000, we have to wait until May of 2018.
It's November of 17, right?
What about November of this year?
No.
I think we should check on this a little further. My understanding was always the general elections were May and November of even-numbered years. Those were no costs. Other elections, it was other set elections, March, May, September, and November, and off years or uneven number years. Those were based on the number of issues on the ballot, and the costs would be divided among the entities that place things on the ballot. I haven't looked into it for a while, so it used to be about $1 per registered voter is what the cost was if you were the only one on the ballot.
Okay.
And we have 20+ thousand.
Okay. Thoughts, Councilor Anderson?
Not specifically to this per se, because I heard what you had mentioned with respect to our public safety needs and so forth at the outset here. That's kind of been a concern that I've had. I've had a lot of people express that to me as well, about while we may be contemplating a parks or funding for parks, there is a funding need for our police as well. And I'm a little uncomfortable just talking solely about a parks fee at this point without, and I'm not trying to pit one against the other. But I think if we're going to be talking about some of these, this type of thing, that I think that has to be a part of the conversation as well.
Well, and that's well taken, because whatever process we put in place for collecting and assessing parks fees will probably be the same mechanism we would use for a public safety fee if we move forward with something like that. So it's good to think of that in terms of, this is not just a one-off, but this is going to be a mechanism that we are going to use, similar to cities all over Oregon who have found, okay, we can't use our property taxes, we can't change them as a vote of the people. Even 100% of the people of Kaiser said, yes, let's raise our property taxes for parks. We can't. The state constitution won't let us. So we, as the community of Kaiser, we want to be able to take care of our parks and to provide for adequate public safety. This is one of the few options, sustainable options we've got left under the state constitution. So no, I think it's a point well taken. So I think we need to be cognizant of that. Although we are discussing the parks fee at this point, this is going to be a mechanism that is going to have to probably work for both.
That can be replicated.
Yeah, thank you. That's a good word, replicated.
Well, I guess it's talking about or proposing, whether it's by referral, by ordinance, or what have you, separate and not having them combined together, but having them separated. That's where I'm uncomfortable, and having a separate conversation about that as a separately proposed fee, if that were the route that folks wanted to take.
And I guess I'm on the other side of that one. I would not be comfortable combining them, because I want it really clear that the money for parks are for parks. The money for public safety is for public safety, and we're not going to supplant, and we heard this tonight, that and this was in the recommendation that was added, and I like that language, that the money raised from a fee goes to parks, period, and we don't move stuff around within the general fund, which is called supplanting likewise, if we allocate, if the people of Kaiser say, yes, we want to institute a public safety fee, those dollars are just for that purpose. And we want to make sure that in anything that we enact, there's clarity on what those dollars are going to be used for and what they can't be used for. And I heard loud and clear that people want certainty in that. Parks fees are for parks. Any other fee is for that purpose. And as part of, being accountable for asking for money and then using that money exactly the way that we have said we're going to use it. Councilor Ryan.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. To Councilor Anderson's point, I think the conversation with the police budget has happened. Neither one of these are new conversations, obviously, but that's happened quite a while in budget. We've already approved new officers. That's not an issue of how or that we are. It's just a timing. If I see that, I think the time and effort's been spent on our park budget from a lot of different resources, and I would just like to take a second and just say. Kaiser, you've heard me say many times, we have a lot of growing pains for different reasons. Look at our police, they're super busy. There's a lot of things we could say, but we are here, I want to remind people, we are here because the community brought safety concerns to us, and that included closing our parks. People, this isn't, we're not just playing around with a few dollars. We're saying we're ready to close parks. We don't have the maintenance. We don't have the safety happening for our kids that we need to have, and that's why we're here. So let's begin with remembering that. And then I personally got involved and stepped up and became part of the task force, as did several of us. And what we found out was we talked to the community and we did surveys, which were fabulous. But at the same time, we went out because we didn't get the response we needed. So we took it upon ourselves to go out and talk to the businesses. We talked to the community. I went door to door personally. I listened to people firsthand. What's important to you? What's not important to you? And there was a lot of great answers, and I love the diversity. But I think it's important to remember that we listened to the community. They talked, the majority of the people I talked to, especially were young people moving here from out of town, to be honest. We have growing pains in Kaiser. We are not going to be able to stay at we are at 2.8%, but we can't maintain our parks at that. We cannot continue to grow our communities and offer great livability if we're not willing to put our money where our mouth is as residents. And so I heard people say, oh, I just assumed we were already there. I assumed we were one of these multi-million-dollar park budgets because we do such a great job with what we have. We take our resources and we multiply them. We'll take that 10,000. Rich is better, Rich Walsh is better than anybody at talking about making money grow. We have grants available. We have SDCs. We have a lot of options and resources, but they have to work together. And I know it's complicated, but they have to work together in a partnership. And I know you're talking about, well, let's just do maintenance or let's just do this. It's time. It's really time to listen to the community. And multiple people said to me, I want to write a check. I will step up. How can I help do this, make this happen? I heard it over and over and over and again. And so I feel confident speaking on behalf of the people I talked to that said, we will do a good job being fiscally responsible, matching your money, making it grow, making it work, keeping the kids safe, which was number one from every parent I talked to. And, and the fact that we are a great city, but we have to step up and, we're going to be at that 2.8%. So it's time for the residents to step up and make this work. Not more volunteers, not more, I don't want to discount the police. You all know how I feel about that. I'm very strongly about our budget. And I'm sorry, I'll get off this little soapbox, but I worked really hard with the Parks budget, who did an amazing job, or Parks Department did an amazing job, and I don't want that to be discounted because we heard a lot of great things, and I don't want that to be lost. Okay. Thank you.
All right, I'm going to go back to the question then about whether or not, okay, we've talked about election, we've talked about ordinance, and it sounds like we have some dissensions, so we probably can't do this by consensus. So I believe we're going to have to do this by motion, whether we're going to go by ordinance or by election. Am I correct in this? Well, we could either take care of that question now or continue the conversation and talk about the level of the parks fee and then determine whether or not it goes to election further into this conversation. Choice of the council. Councilor Freeman.
So I think I know I share Councilor Anderson. Sorry, Bruce, I looked right at you and couldn't think of what your name was.
Incredibly memorable.
I know, sorry. I'm going to to blame it on this lovely head cold that I have. So for the people I've talked to, they love their parks, but everyone that I've talked to said, please come first. And I know through this whole conversation, it's not one or the other. But honestly, we have not even broached the police conversation. And for me, I want to have that conversation before I ever proceed with what's on this paper.
Okay.
We have the document that the police chief put together a few months ago, and I know some of it's been circulated, but I don't know how many people have truly seen that document. We've not had a public forum like this, and I hope when we do, we have as many people that are here tonight that come out and speak either in favor or opposed of that fee as well. But this is an and discussion for me, not tonight to determine if we're going to charge $2 or $8, $4. We're not going to charge any fee. And I'm not to discount any of the work that's been done by the Parks Board because it's fabulous. And the community outreach, I think, has been above board. And I think that's one thing we can pride ourselves. And the public testimony by everyone here tonight is also a testimony that you truly care about this community. There was a lot of people that chose not to testify, and sometimes that's a comfort zone of getting in front of that microphone and then knowing that you're on TV as well. But not to discredit that, and I hope that next time that you would choose to say what you have to say. But to me, this is a conversation that we heard tonight, but I need to hear about police as well.
Councilor Anderson.
I would just second. Councilor Freeman really so eloquently stated what was on my mind. And, just lest there be any confusion, I am absolutely a supporter of parks. I got 4 kids of my own. We've lived here in their entire lives, 27 plus year resident of Kaiser. And I share those sentiments completely. And I really do appreciate the effort by our Parks Department. They were extremely diligent in going out and engaging in the effort and gathering the information. And I wish we had this great a turnout at every single city council meeting. I think a lot of the issues that we are looking at week in and week out are really important. And I just really appreciate the thoughts that have been conveyed on this. Thank you.
So what I'm hearing is that we've got some very good information on the parks, what our needs are. This is urgent, as we know from the condition of our parks, and we have just gone through the budget process. We know exactly how much we're going to have going forward for this fiscal year. And in my mind, waiting another year to do an election would not be responsible. It just would not be responsible. We are at that point with our parks that the safety issues, the maintenance issues have reached critical. And to delay would put people at risk, put our parks at risk, and I cannot in good conscience say, yes, we will wait a year to do an election or push this off any longer. I believe that the survey, the work that's been done to get out in the community and listen to people, listening here tonight and at other forums, has spoken volumes that, yes, we understand it takes cash to take care of our parks. We've been presented with great information on how much cash is needed to just start getting after it, just start to make headway with the maintenance. And I believe it's responsible on our part, in my opinion, to get a fee in place as quickly as possible so we can start taking care of the parks this year. The more we wait, as we saw with Claggett Creek Park and many of our other facilities, if we wait another year, the costs are only going to escalate and the liability to the community will only go up. I feel very strongly that we need to have this conversation and move forward with a fee to get after this that is equitably paid throughout our community. We can start at a simple $2 or $4 level, get that out there and get this money coming in so we can take care of things as quickly as possible. I really believe the livability of our community is at stake. I also agree that we need to now fully engage in the conversation regarding our public safety. We have gotten very good information from the chief and from our finance department that $4 per per household per month will fund all 5 positions that we need, that the chief has identified. We have not done the outreach yet on this that we have done with the parks. And in my opinion, it was important to have this conversation first, and here's why. We're not the experts on police, but we are the experts on our parks to some degree because we use them. I really believe we need to have the conversation about a public safety fee, but I think it's more in terms of understanding what we need and why, and the fee structure, how we implement, why we implement, and why we have to get money this way and we can't do it through property taxes has been a very foundational part of this whole exercise. Because I've heard from people still, well, just put out something to raise property taxes. We can't. We can't. The Oregon State Constitution says we can't. We can do 5-year levies, come back every 5 years and ask again, and that works in some situations. But I believe that sustainably going forward, that this is not an expense that's going to go away unless our parks go away. I feel very strongly that we need to move forward with the parks fee to get after the maintenance this year. I understand the desire for an election to hear from more voters, but quite frankly, I believe it is the leadership of this council to say, we understand, we know, and we've worked with people in our community on the budget process. We know what dollars are there, and we can put together a mechanism to take care of the basic needs of our parks and share the cost throughout our community. I feel very strongly that we must not delay any longer in meeting this very, very basic need. Do we need to have a conversation about what the police funding looks like and how we do that through a fee? Absolutely yes. Absolutely yes. And that is an effort that I will wholeheartedly support and get involved with. But our parks are in desperate need now. And I would very strongly urge us to go forward with a parks fee, put together a mechanism to discuss and get this started now. I understand the desire possibly for an annual fee. A monthly is what we do, or bi-monthly, with our city billing. There's a mechanism already in place. It will cost us nothing more to put that on there. Can we safeguard people who are seniors, who are low income? There's a way to do it. We are not the first ones out of this barn, and we can definitely tap other cities, but our parks are in desperate need of basic maintenance, and we've got to get on this. So there's my soapbox. I feel very strongly we need to move forward. Councilor Ryan.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just real quickly, when I did, it is a conversation that people don't understand why we can't just raise the tax rate. We hear it a lot in the community for a lot of different reasons. But when I explained that to them and we talked about taking a fee, no matter what that fee was, they saw that as investing back in their property values and investing in their kids and the safety. And not only that, but in keeping, and Chief is real big on this, keeping our crime rate low. And so for those factors, it made sense, since we can't increase the tax rate, it made sense for them, the people I spoke with, when you could explain it clearly, that it made sense to take those few dollars and say, absolutely. You know, it's nothing compared to what we did the property value or the park costs and the multi-million dollars going into the local parks that were equal to our size city, and they're all at several $million. You know, we're talking, $5, $8. We're not talking a big number. So people felt very confident in that when I spoke with them. So I just wanted to share that.
Okay. So I'm going to throw, are people comfortable with maybe discussing a couple of motions moving forward? I don't know that we can reach consensus, unanimity on moving forward with this, but I feel very strongly that we need to discuss having staff bring back a mechanism for a fee that would be on our billing. And the reason I'm putting that all together is because our billing mechanism does not add cost. And I'm going to go back to our city motto, mission. efficient, and least cost. If I'm going to support something, it's not going to have an additional almost, over $9,000 additional cost because of a perception of how that money is being collected, just because it has a different label on the bill. $9,000 isn't worth it. I know we can do a whole lot with that $9,000. We just had arguments about far less dollars on the Budget Committee over the years. I just can't support something that's going to incur a cost that doesn't get a bang for the buck, and I can't see labeling a bill as a bang for the buck for our community. So that's kind of where I'm at, folks.
I would agree.
All right, let me put a motion on the table, and then we can hash it, okay? I move the Kaiser City Council direct staff to come back with a fee mechanism for $4 per month per household. That would, let me go down the list here for Tracy. Be structured so that the prioritization would not cause a person to have their water turned off for failure to pay the fee. That those funds would not supplant in any way the general fund allocation according to budget policy. Okay. And attach it to the Kaiser billing structure in place to incur no additional cost to our residents.
Are you staying
Oh.
at $4 or?
I'm just talking about the 4 right now because, anyway, I need a second before we can debate.
I'll second that.
Okay, for discussion. All right. It's on. Here we go.
Madam Mayor?
Yes.
I had read a question earlier because we didn't talk about including local businesses in this fee. Are we keeping it strictly to residents, or can we talk about putting the businesses into this
We
this
can have
fee?
that.
And what are your opinions of that?
Yep, this was a starting point. Okay, so my motion was that it was going to be for the households. So the first item that Councilor Ryan wants to talk is whether the businesses would be included. And I don't think that was included in this originally, and I think we have a breakdown of residences versus businesses, do we not? I think I saw that.
That is correct. That's part of the attachment. So you can see the additional commercial utility accounts. We have approximately 400 accounts in the city. So at your $4 level, you're looking at an additional $19,200 per year.
Okay. So adding the commercial accounts, and I'm trying to see if this was, okay, so we have, under the $4 column on attachment 1, you've broken it down based on our annual revenue. Now, this would be annual revenue from all the households? Yes. Am I reading that line right, on the top line?
That is correct.
So annual revenue from households would be $686,400. If we added in commercial utility counts at the $4 rate, that would add an additional $19,200. And then senior living apartments, annual revenue is $24,000. And then you have the breakdown for senior discounts, et cetera, that we can discuss individually.
Gotcha. I'm sorry,
So
misunderstood.
is there a, so, yeah, we have a motion and second, so the item up for discussion now is whether or not to add in the commercial utility accounts. So we don't have a friendly amendment or a motion, but that's, anybody want to move on that?
I'd like to add a friendly amendment to include our local businesses on the fee, but I also would like to entertain the possibility of increasing it over a period of time, beginning with $4,
Well, okay, we have to do one at a time.
One friendly
Yeah,
amendment?
we have to do one thing at a time.
Okay.
So it's separate.
I
So
think
this
the
is-
businesses is important, in my opinion, unless the council disagrees.
So we have a motion for a friendly.
Okay, so we, friendly amendment to add the commercial utility accounts, and I think that's the line you're talking about, to collect for them, as well as the,
That's it.
as well as the households that are already included in the proposed, in the
And I say
motion.
that, Madam Mayor, because I believe that our crime rate affects our local businesses as well.
So this is the way this is structured, it's $4 per meter. So a commercial business would be paying the $4, or would they be paying something higher?
They would be paying $4.
Okay. I accept the friendly amendment. My second? It's up to the second whether it's a friendly amendment or it goes to an independent motion.
Who seconded it?
Councilor Herrera,
I second it. Wait, I'm thinking here. I'll go ahead and second with a friendly amendment.
you take it? Okay.
Yeah, we gotta move on this thing.
All right. Councilor Anderson?
To clarify, is this on, does this get levied on just the water bill, water sewer? What if you're only sewer?
These numbers include water, sewer, storm, so it's typically all of your households.
Okay, so those of us that have our own well, it would be on our bill too?
Correct.
Correct? Okay, I just want to be clear on
It's
that.
under the City of Kaiser billing mechanism. We got to find just a way to change the narrative, I guess. Anyway, all right, so that's one friendly amendment. And then, Councilor Ryan, you wanted to talk about incremental?
I would just love a discussion from each of the counselors or thoughts that if we looked at this and grew it over a period of time, maybe 2 to 3 years, starting at the 4 and then going up to the 8, so it's an incremental adjustment.
If I may.
Please.
As an ordinance, ordinances can be amended at any point by the council. So if the council wishes to take, let's say you approve it at a $4 rate, period, you could take it up in a year, 2 years, 3 years, and amend the ordinance at that time to a different rate, as opposed to setting into place an escalation.
I would be concerned with the transparency and the fear of the community of continuing to raise it without a cap. And so I'd really like to see a cap on that, in my opinion, with.
You could put a cap on it now, but without an escalation
Well, then it's, but,
in place.
okay, I'm just thinking if we did a growth, then it would give the community opportunity to prepare and understand that it's coming, and that we're not just increasing it later for, because we feel like it. It's more of it's implemented now, and then we put a cap on it so that there isn't that fear that we don't do that to the community. Just my 2 cents.
I think those are points extremely well taken. Councilor Herrera?
Well, I think she pretty much said what I was thinking of $4 I'm talking about this motion with the friendly amendment, $4 with a cap of $8, and no time yet. We can discuss it later as far as the increments. But cap it at $8. That's kind of where I'm at. In other words, set the motion at $4 right now with the friendly amendment also. But without talking about how we get to the $8, just put a cap on it so we know there's an end game as far as the money. That's where I'm at.
Well, and I would add to that it could not be raised for the first year and have to go through the budget process report. Because the other thing we've heard, and I agree with,
can
is
live with that.
reporting out. So that could not be increased for the first year. I'm making notes here.
Do I second that? With
Hang
the,
on.
Hold on, she's going to add the accountability, I
Okay,
think is
so not
important.
increase for minimum 1 year,
Cap it.
and then have a $8 cap, and have a reporting requirement from the Parks Board and the Parks Department on what was done with those funds. Okay, did I kind of capture that?
Yes, because you're talking about accountability with a full report, correct, of what the funds were spent on and what they were, okay, is it, an option to put in if, if we approve, then it automatically goes to the $6 and then an $8 after?
That would probably be a budgetary discussion a year from now, whether it's necessary and to what level, based on the reporting out. And then it'd be recommendation.
Well, the only reason I hesitate on that is that because when I've listened to the Parks Board's needs and the amount of maintenance that we're talking about, it's a planning thing where you have to sit down with it. I'm a little fearful to leave it open-ended. I love the cap. I think that's important for the community. But because we're sitting down having discussions on maintenance and how, $600,000 or more to repave just one surface when we have all of these projects, we were going to discuss the order of the projects, and I love that diversity, but I feel like we need to be able to know that that money's going to be there and that we are counting on the increase so that we can plan and really dial in what the Parks Board needs to do. So,
What I would recommend at that point would be recommendation from the Parks Board. Once these dollars are in place and they've prioritized the maintenance, engaging with the community on what do we need? What are the next things? What's the next tier of need? And then they'll be able to make a recommendation on the cost and come back through the budget process.
okay, in May at the budget, is that what you're saying?
That would be my recommendation. That would be my opinion.
I'm
on
comfortable
one
with that. I
7.
have a lot of faith in our Parks Board. I think that they'll have the needs assessment dialed in, I would think.
Well, and on top of that, they'll be able to, we'll have the reporting out, we'll have the next tier of need identified, and then there'll be accountability to the community and engagement with the community, because they're going to have folks coming in going, okay, this is the next thing we need, and really be able to involve more of the community in what dollars do we need and when do we need them and how do we need them. So I'd rather do a needs escalation rather than an automatic escalation, if that makes sense. Councilor Anderson, did you have your hand up? Okay, so. Oh, Bill did, I'm sorry. I looked, there we go. Mr. Lawyer.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just one comment I wanted to make is in enacting any fee, there's a time lag in getting the program up and running. You have to collect the monies before you can spend the monies. I'm concerned that a year is not long enough to show much action, much activity, much accomplishments because of the time it takes to get the program running and have the revenue available to do the things. Just
That
just a
first year,
comment.
you're gonna have to initially collect the funds, and before you spend anything, you're gonna want to engage with the community and ask, all right, with these funds, how do you prioritize our spending? What's first? Is it ADA improvements first? Get all those out of the way? Is it build the master plan? Is it starting to provide support to the youth rec programs that are handled by all of those things?
Well,
You want to have that discussion, and that will take some time
Right.
before you can actually roll into enacting the program.
Right.
So I think Bill's right. That first year is going to be pretty tough to show.
Oh, I would disagree with that wholeheartedly, because everybody who's been to one of our parks knows what maintenance needs to be done. And I think that Robert Johnson has a list of maintenance that needs to be done, and I'll bet he can go down that list. It's like, oh, I can get them out to trim these trees. I'm talking about real basic maintenance here.
And
can
if
certainly do
and
those
if
things,
and,
And
and
that's
if
what
I
we're looking for.
if I may
Please.
help Robert, because I know he's sitting there thinking I can't do that. Madam Mayor, we have equipment challenges right now.
Okay.
We can't increase our maintenance level. We don't have the equipment. We don't have the bodies. That takes funding.
Right.
The funding's not available day one.
Right.
It
Plus-
takes time to spin this program up
So if
and
we're
get
gonna-
active and get things
We're going
done.
to hire additional personnel. That's 3 to 4 to 5 months.
Just time,
to do
and I-
recruitment, bring people on.
We want it now.
I know.
I wanted it 5 years ago,
Things
but
take time.
I just want to emphasize, I don't want to sit in front of you after a year and say, we tried really hard, but we don't look very good. I'd rather sit in front of you today and say, look, in 1 year, we're not going to be able to accomplish as much as you might think because it takes time to get the program up and running.
Well, and
That's my main point.
So, and I appreciate trying to have realistic expectations, and that's important. But I think that the progress made toward the maintenance needs of the parks will be a very important reporting. It's going to be an important metric. It's going to be an important story to tell. What has been done and what have you been able to get going because these have been made available to you. If we did nothing now and we waited another year, you'd be that much farther behind. So if you can show, what I will be asking for is what has been able to get off the ground
Okay.
toward taking care of our parks.
And it may very well be that some of those metrics are, we engaged with the public and determined prioritization. We developed a program, and we hired 3 staff, whatever it is, and accomplished these maintenance items. But I guarantee you in year 2, these maintenance items, because now the program, because we spent the first 4, 5, 6 months getting the program spun up, year 2, those maintenance items will be like this. And so, as long as everybody understands that, then absolutely.
As
And we
long
can
as
definitely
the-
create the metrics, but year 2 is really good when you're going to see that.
So are you telling me
boost
to
of
reel back
maintenance.
my enthusiasm?
No. I want you to be enthusiastic. I simply want you to understand that we're government, and it takes time. We have to go through hiring practices and all of those kinds of things to actually be able to do the work. So that first year is going to be difficult because a big chunk of it is going to be spent engaging with the public, developing the program, hiring people, getting them on board. And then you have the wet season. And so you really only have that first part of the spring before we come back to budget to be able to show you a billion things that we did.
Right.
So
So $1 million instead of $1 billion.
$1 million instead of $1 billion.
Gotcha.
I guess to summarize my concerns is as long as the expectations of what we can accomplish are realistic, I'm fine with that.
Okay.
I just don't want the expectations to be, you're gonna get all this done when we know right now today, that's just not realistically possible, so. That's my main concern.
Understood. Councilor Freeman.
So, Tim, I had asked you about, people in Kaiser and how many were on reduced incomes, and it is on your attachment 1. But I think something, and don't take this the wrong way, I'm not downing the fee, but we also need to understand that if you're a homeowner and you decide not to pay this fee, you may go to collections, right? But your water bill isn't going to be turned off. And I think that there is some, call me the what if person, but I think there's a lot of what ifs out there if someone chooses not to pay this fee. And I think we need to be realistic as well as maybe some people won't pay that fee, and to have a good understanding of how many people within our community are at a reduced rate based on income or potential, 200% of the poverty level. And so on your form, your attachment 1, the ones that you have negative, these are ones taking away from revenue, if I'm understanding this correctly?
That is correct.
Okay. So I think that's just an important feature that we understand, that, there's a lot of people that support this fee, and there's going to be other people that maybe aren't able to pay this fee in our community, and that's okay. But I also think we need to understand that just because on top, if you're looking at annual revenue of the $4 fee of $686,400, but you have all these that we're taking away from that revenue, if I'm looking at this correctly, correct?
That is correct.
Okay, so I don't want someone to just say, okay, if we have $4, it's $686,400, but you're looking down potentially the senior discount rate or a low income, discount rate, which I'm all for that as well, right? We have a lot of people in our community that are on fixed incomes. We have a lot of new families starting out with starting out as a family, and lots of different socioeconomics throughout our whole community. And I think that's just something that we have to look at and be realistic. And I think that will play into how the first year or the first 2 years potentially play out as far as actual revenue that's going to be generated by this fee.
Okay.
So I'm all excited, don't get me wrong. I share your enthusiasm, but I guess I'm more the realist of going, you can't just look at the potential revenue. We have to really wait and see what's coming in, and so we know what we have to spend for all those great things that need to be done, so.
Well, I would concur with that. So I didn't actually, I went down the list, but I didn't actually move it as a friendly amendment. So just to recap it, that the fee would not increase for a minimum of 1 year. So I'm looking to you, Roland, to say if you'll accept this. You good with that? Yep. $8 cap
$8 cap, starting at $4.
and a reporting requirement.
Reporting requirements. Okay, I'm seconding all those things.
All right, so those are friendly amended. Yes.
Friendly amended, okay.
We have amended in a friendly manner. Councilor Reed.
I just, I guess wanted to point out, because one of the big objections to this was, tying it to the utility bills and so forth. And I understand that that would be the most cost-effective way to do it, but I also just kind of wanted to bring out the point again that it could be, it could reflect a lot more flexibility that could potentially help us out even more, for a couple of reasons. First of all, it would be perhaps easier for people to get the waivers that they need, whether it's age-based or income-based, or if they wanted to contribute more than the mandatory amount. So I just kind of, I guess, wanted to throw that out there for further discussion, if anybody else was concerned about that. So that's all.
Well, we did do a donation line on our parks, got parks on the brain, on our Kaiser billing several years ago for parks, and it had a rapidly diminishing rate of return. As people got used to, I'm just writing the check, or if they're like me, they don't even see a paper copy, I just hit pay bill, and that's it. I don't see the other part. So as more and more people go to online bill pay, I don't know about you, but I'm doing my bills, I'm just hitting submit, and I don't read it. Sorry. I just want to get done, get the bills paid, and I'm on my way. I know there's other people who spend more time looking at all the different line items on that bill. I am not one of those people. So unless I see a real big change, going, what? But to your point, we have done that in the past, and we can put something on the bill, and we could even find a way to put it in the online bill pay. Check here if you want to increase, if you want to donate or donate park money to the parks. We could, that can be done. I'm looking at Tim going, yes, it can.
Yes, it can.
But as a sustainable revenue stream, that is very changeable, the donation portion. And it did diminish over time.
Madam Mayor?
Yes.
I have as far as the $4 starting with, now when you put in the discounts and the requirements for, low income and the elderly, would that be realistic, like $3 really, or? If you think about it, it could be quite a bit, so.
Well, the amounts are right here.
Yeah, I saw it right there.
It really
$4,
depends on
we're talking about-
which level you go at. I mean, there's various options. So yeah, you could discount it down to the $3 range. I mean, it's really up to the council which direction they go and
once
what
we
kind of
establish
discounts and
what
how
our
much they
levels
want
are
to do.
of low income and elderly, would that make a change in the amount actually, or would it be more like I said, $3?
Yeah, it'll make a big difference ultimately with what the total is that is collected. It really will.
That's what I was saying, because $2 to me wouldn't really be a good starting point, because it's hardly that. I was just curious how much that would be. I mean, we're going to find out, aren't we? If we do that, if we proceed.
Just as an example, and I don't want to delay the debate, but just as an example, I did a quick calculation just right here, and so if you add the commercial utility accounts, it ends up a little over $700,000 in income in any given year. And then I picked a number between 65 and 75. I just put it at 70 years old. So if you pick 70 years old and drop a 50% discount on that, okay, for seniors, that my guesstimate was that it would reduce that amount by about $60,000. And then if you add the low income and basically exempt them, that reduces it another $82,368. And so your $700,000 becomes $563,000 very quickly. So you just have to understand that. The question is, is it socially equitable to do that? And my suggestion is it probably is.
Okay.
So.
And Tim, we already have mechanisms, in place for people who have financial issues to be able to come to the city regarding their water, sewer, and stormwater.
Well, with respect to stormwater, we do have, or with respect to sewer, we do offer low-income assistance, reduced rates. For people who are struggling overall with their entire bill, we typically refer them out to St. Vincent's or Salvation Army or places like that.
Okay. To make sure that they continue to receive water and sewer. Okay,
Correct.
Councilor Ryan?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. With both Kim and Laura brought up excellent points. And with those variables and the dollar figures that Chris just, did the math for me real quick. But I honestly, my concern was the billing, the cost to the city. But in the same respect, because we're lowering that with those variables of seniors and elderly living, and then of course hardships, which I think is definitely needs to be taken consideration. I appreciate that. But to their point, what would it make sense then to go to the $8? I understand that's the cap, go to the $8 and then do a billing. So because that was our biggest concern, was separating the billing and the water, because that was the number one concern we heard from everyone. Then we could afford the deductions in the service of, taking away those things like the variables, and we could afford the billing so that there isn't the confusion.
Well, if I could just throw just a quick point on here, I feel ridiculous arguing against the city council wanting to give the city more money, but I'm going to right at the moment. So the difference between our existing parks budget and one that includes the $4 even with all the discounts takes that budget from about $360-something thousand a year to over almost $900,000 a year. When you combine the two pieces, that's a significant difference in our parks budget that we can do a lot of work with, even with the discounts. Right. So I just, if that's a number that works more for the community and is easier for the community to stomach for the first year or two until you show the results, that's my suggestion. Versus going with the $8, because quite honestly, even at the $8 level, it would be probably difficult for Robert to figure out how to spend those additional resources in the first year or so. Because once again, we have to spin up an entire program.
Well, I don't think it would be a couple years before we actually got that amount in, especially with the variables that we're talking about. So, and I guess, again, I kind of am coming from a little bit different perspective. I totally agree with you. I see your point. But because we're protecting our seniors and we're protecting the low income, which I think is critical, the families I talked to didn't blink an eye at $8 with our low tax rate. So that's my experience with the speaking. So not that I'm disagreeing with you, I just think that it's not as big of an amount as maybe by protecting those classes that we could have been. So.
Any further changes, concerns? Councilor Anderson.
Well, first a question. So what we're talking about, is that going to come back as in a written set out proposal?
That is correct. This is a direction to staff to come back with an ordinance that embodies
Not
these
voting
things.
on the proposals tonight?
The vote tonight is to have staff come back to us with this document.
That you will then vote on.
Then that we will then vote on the final version. And it could be amended at that point as well.
Okay. Because I have a certain, some certain thoughts on this, but I may want to just keep those until we have an actual, and I appreciate that clarification because I was feeling like this is a very rushed process. I still have a lot of questions that I think we need to have answered. Getting a better handle on the low income issue, I think is critical. I still would like to know about how we're going to keep track of people's ages and that sort of thing. I can tell you that most utilities don't get that information. If somebody has a problem paying a bill or whatever, then they can contact the utility. Those folks can seek assistance from like the Community Action Agency or something along those lines, work out a payment plan of so forth. So that is still an issue that I'm concerned with. If we do have that sort of information, I think it needs to be really stored carefully. It's just very sensitive information, I think, on any ratepayer.
We store all of our utility billing information is very very important to us, and we keep it very carefully protected. My thoughts on this, and I haven't put a lot of thought into it yet, just because I didn't know where the council was going to go on this, is that these, if you do decide to add the potential of discounts in different categories, that they would be self-selected in. and we'd create a mechanism for a customer to come in and prove their age, prove their income level, and then they get checked on a box, and we know to bill them at that rate from that point forward. So I don't see that part as all that difficult, and then we would take the data, store it, and we wouldn't even necessarily need to keep their data once we knew what box to check them into and at what rate to put them in. So I think there's a mechanical way to do that without creating a huge risk for the customer.
Okay.
So
I'd like to get a better handle on what that is, honestly, to better understand it. I'm sorry, but my experience is a little bit different than this. So, just one other final thought, and then I'll shut up.
No, I've appreciated your input because this is a very robust conversation that we absolutely had to have.
I think if this is going to move forward, then, I mean, one thing to consider would be including something along these lines in the bill, whether it's a line or something along those lines, for folks that are low income or on fixed incomes. That may be something to include. I don't know, but just a thought. So, anyway, and just, I know I said one final thing, but final thing. I will support moving forward with asking staff to draft a proposal, but that does not mean that I am supportive of the proposal.
Fair enough. Councilor Freeman.
So I would second what Councilor Anderson said. So just from a time perspective, because I'd made my comment earlier about this is police and parks for me. And so I know this is going back to staff for some work, and then will come back to us, which potentially could be as early as June, right? I'm not going to say it's going to come back May 18th or whenever we're meeting again, right? So June or July. But so I guess my hope is that in between then, that we can actually get another session, maybe our June work session, which I don't know if we have anything planned, that we actually have a forum like this. We have the not reader board, but the display at, the focal point that was, I think, hopefully a good representation of this meeting tonight, that we can actually start having that police conversation before we truly make a final decision on this.
I know that Chief Teague is ready to have that discussion, and I know that he's already begun having that discussion out in the community with various church groups and different folks. So all he needs is me to tell him when, and he will be there ready to have that debate. And we'll bring those folks I know that he's engaged with. We'll invite them as well. So I think we can have a robust discussion pretty quickly on that topic if you're ready for it.
Absolutely. Absolutely ready for it. I absolutely agree. Because I agree, this has to be an and conversation. We understand that fees are a mechanism for us being able to pay for the stuff that we need. And the chief has done a great job analyzing the needs of our public safety and being strategic in not just the number of people. It's not, for him, it's not bodies, it's actually part of a strategic plan. And I think that sharing that out in the community is very, very important. I would absolutely agree, and the faster we can get on with that, the better, to have that conversation. The other part is on the senior and low-income discounts and so forth. I know there are a lot of seniors who can afford. I've talked to a couple myself and say, $2, $4, I'll pay that all day long because I know I can go out in the park and it's going to be safe and accessible for me. So to assume that somebody's a senior and not be able to afford it is probably not a 100% accurate assumption. But I think that rather than put this into the ordinance itself, I would like to ask separately to a report on what that would look like. How do we do it now, and how can we make sure that safeguards are in place for people who truly have a need? I don't know if anybody feels strongly enough that this needs to be in the ordinance itself, or if we can have it as a process that we have in place through our finance department. Thoughts? Counselor Freeman, and then Counselor Reed.
So I thought we already had a process in place with our current, correct me if I'm wrong, correct? So could we
That
not
is correct.
utilize the same process that we have in place today?
You could, you would just want to tell us that you want that process available for this ordinance.
Okay, perfect, thank
Yeah,
you.
I would recommend that we document it so you have something in your hand that you can look at and say, this is
This
what we're
ordinance
currently
allows
doing, this
it.
is what we want us to do.
Yeah.
Okay, so that language, Counselor Reed?
Just wanting to kind of address the point that was made earlier about how this would work in apartments that kind of build the water, or, you know, the utility bills into their monthly rent and so forth. How would that mechanism, I mean, how would that work in terms of their applying for this and how that would work and
I
so
would
forth?
suggest, and it's funny, I've actually thought about this just a tiny bit, that particular, because it's a tough one, because you could have a 100-unit complex with 1 meter, who then, you know, is billed for the number of units and then has to figure out, and within that 100-unit complex, there could be, you know, X percent that are over, you know, if you choose to do, say, a senior discount at 70 or older, you know, whatever, could be, you know, a percentage there, could be a percentage that are on fixed income, et cetera, et cetera. And so I think the best way to approach that is you pick a number of units after which this kicks in, like maybe it's anything above a 4-plex or anything above, you know, 15 units or something like that, where we would just apply like the county's average statistic for whatever that level is across the board to that complex. So if you have 100 units, we'll take, in the county says 14% of our population is 70 and older, and that's the percentage that you land on. We can apply that to that complex, and then they'll get a rate that then they would bill out to through their rent. That's just a thought. I don't know that that works perfectly, but it's the only way I could think of to actually approach that issue, unless we send a bill to each individual unit, and then allow tenants to actually come in and take advantage of.
But
So-
Can we, I want to reel back one, hold the thought on the apartments. I want to reel back on the request that we include in the ordinance language that says that the finance department will use the programs and policies we have in place for senior and low income, would apply to this as well. Is everybody good with that? Yeah. That change? Okay, so that is a friendly amendment. Guess that language in you wanted. Okay, back to the apartments.
Okay.
I'm going to go to Counselor Anderson and then Counselor Ryan. Okay.
Thank you. I guess the one thing that kind of strikes me is that does not account for water usage, though. I mean, applying an average just because of the size of your unit, that has there's no connection that I can see to the amount of water that one uses.
Well, we're not talking about water, we're talking about.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, right. Okay, sorry.
There you go.
I'm tunnel visioned here, sorry.
You and Jerry McGee.
Counselor Ryan.
Why we get along so well.
So, as we move forward with that thought, and I appreciate how you got there. I have seen apartment complexes because they do charge water per door, per unit. So, for example, but I have also seen them take and increase those amounts for their own profitability above what maybe the water bill actually is. So I would want to make sure there's a caveat there to protect our citizens that they cannot increase the fee per doorstep that they would keep and just pay us the $4 or whatever that amount turns out to be. Does that make sense? So it's regulated.
It certainly does. I have absolutely no idea how we would audit that on an annual basis.
Well, we give them the bill and I guess they pay it, but people should know what they're paying, I suppose. I mean, it's going to be known that it's a $4 fee or whatever.
We're going to send them a bill.
Mhm.
We don't regulate rent.
Right.
in the
But it's
city,
like they
so-
might have a $10 water bill for that. I know it's not, but let's just say it is for that unit. They're charging $25 for everybody who moves in. Then they're profiting $15.
Typically typically what happens, from what I understand, is if you have a master meter, is the property owner pays the water bill and the utilities, and all of that is just worked directly into the rent. So
It's a new thing.
so the end user doesn't actually see the water billing. They just pay X number of dollars a year or a month in rent,
Right.
and then the property owner pays the bill.
Right.
So I don't think that we have a way to regulate rents
Right.
and say, we're going to add this $4 fee per unit to you. You can't raise your rent more than that $4 to cover that, because we'd have no way of regulating that.
Where they profit from it.
Yeah,
Okay.
I mean, that's going to end up being a matter of the market.
Sure,
So
understood.
they're
That
going
would
to
mean
they're going to have
regulate
to
the
they're going to have to
rents,
let
but-
we're going to have to let the market regulate whether they're profitable or not.
Okay, thank you.
Well, and that's been a debate with, a number of, communities across the state as rents have gone up. Some property management companies have seized on opportunities to raise rents, for whatever reason. I just hope that they don't send out the messaging, well, the city raised this, so we're just gonna have to raise your rent this when we actually did that, because then we're gonna have a whole lot of angry people down here, and we'll go, whoa.
That happens every day.
Yeah. Talking to you guys, okay. But I guess you're right, there's no way we can get after that except through media, letting people know what the actual costs are. I'm being ignored. Councilor Anderson, did you have a comment? Okay. Any other changes, directions, comments on the motion with all of the friendly amendments?
So
Count-
did we not come to conclusion on two items, actually? One, no mention was made of the senior living apartments. Do you wish to leave those out or add them back in? Our recommendation is to leave them out. The senior living,
Okay, yeah, we did not address that.
was that our recommendation, right?
They are not included at this moment.
They're not
Anybody want-
included at this moment.
They are not currently included.
Okay. And then the other question.
Hang on, Councilor Ryan?
Do we need to do that one at a time then? Because he said and other, so I'm just,
Okay,
don't
well,
want to be
that
premature.
is not included right now. Does anybody want to include those?
I would include it, in my opinion, just based on the senior living. We have multiple senior living facilities, and I don't think it's fair to assume that just because they're of a certain age, they can't afford it. So now, if they meet the criteria, I think that would fall under that, but I wouldn't want to separate it out.
Okay, I'm not going to accept that as a friendly amendment, so we'll have to go to a motion. And the reason not is I remember the debate we had over the park systems development charges and the senior living and assisted living in particular, where they provide a fair amount of park space within their facility. So this is a different user than the typical household or even independent living. So at this point, I'm not comfortable with that, but we could go to a motion. Mr. Lawyer?
Madam Mayor, just for clarification, in the staff report, senior living, the term senior living was referencing independent senior living.
Okay,
Apartments like at our Emerald Point,
okay.
that type of facility, not assisted care, it's just truly independent senior living apartments. Just,
Okay,
I want
well,
to
I
make sure you
appreciate that.
understood how I use the term.
Okay. And I remember we had a big debate about all the terminology within that industry as well.
Right.
No, I think,
A-
thank you
and-
for the clarification.
And for clarification, the systems development charge discussion was around the same units.
Okay,
And that's why I included it here because of the previous discussion.
okay. I appreciate that.
That was a reduced SDC amount for these types of apartments. And I think it was about, well, back then, I think the fee was for a regular apartment was 950 about, and the senior fee was about 700. So it was reduced. It's changed since then because they've increased, but it was a reduced SDC rate for those types of apartments. So,
Okay.
and that was the ordinance, I believe the ordinance it was, and the methodology for the SDCs was amended to account for that.
Okay. Thank you. I appreciate the clarification.
You bet.
So, do you want to make a motion and then we can debate it?
See if I say it correctly. I would make a motion to include the senior living, not the retirement assisted living, correct?
The senior
Within that,
living apartments and, I'm sorry, yeah, the senior living apartments in the fee.
yes.
Is there a
With the-
second?
Yeah.
Right, that this would be, yes. So she's moving, that would be amended.
actually voted on.
Yeah, but this is going to be a vote, so we need a second to debate it.
If they don't qualify, they'll still be exempt.
Right, so this is not including.
The whole thing with the $4, $8 cap, all these
Right.
amendments.
So we've done to kind of back up, it was, Tracy's got it written down, probably better than I do. Okay, it was a $4 per household fee with an $8 cap, not to increase for a minimum of 1 year, a reporting requirement, added in the commercial utility accounts, and that the finance department use programs and processes to help senior low-income residents. Is that everything?
That's everything so far.
Yeah, and so now we're discussing the senior living. So I asked her to make it as a motion rather than a friendly amendment because I wanted to discuss it further. Okay, so it's been moved and seconded that we amend this to include the senior living apartments within the fee. Councilor Reed.
I guess I still am not really comfortable with how this works with apartments, and I think, particularly with our senior living, that's going to be especially an issue. And whether or not they can afford it, I think a large percentage of them are on fixed income. And, well, again, that would be something that would need to be, that assumption would need to be carried out through statistics and so forth. But I think just because this is difficult to manage in apartments anyway, and with such a potential for people who would be exempted from that, I think it's reasonable to keep them, the senior living facilities, exempt from this.
Okay. Further conversation, discussion? Seeing none, all in favor of amending to add the senior living apartments to the $4 fee, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign?
No.
Motion fails with one yes, and then the others no, and one absent.
And then the only other question I had was regarding apartments. Do you want us to come up with a method to try to figure out how to do that or not? Like to add the discounts to apartment facilities or simply not even to attempt it? That's all I.
So you're looking for a simple one-size-fits-all apartments rather than try to go apartment by apartment, because that would be
Well,
absolutely,
It would be, it would be difficult. I mean, I was talking with somebody earlier today, and they're like, well, if I have 100 residents, do each of them have to come to me and prove their age, and then I bring that to you and say that I've got 13 residents that are below a certain age limit, and then what if, because apartments, people are constantly moving in and out, how do we keep track of that? So that's when I was thinking about just adding the average of these whatever categories you come up with onto apartments. But if you don't want us to even do that, then that's fine. That makes it simpler for us. But if you want us to come up with a mechanism, we'll noodle it and see if we can bring something back.
thoughts?
Sounds like a lot of work.
It does sound like a lot of work.
It sounds like a lot of work.
Is it a lot of work or not?
I mean, I would think that it would be
I
a
think for
fair.
apartments, it may be a lot of work,
I
actually.
think has to be a fair amount of.
Mechanically, it would be problematic with our existing system. We would have to probably go back to our vendor and figure out a better solution than. What's that?
We'd almost have to make contact with every apartment owner.
We probably would at some point, yes. We do have a fairly good record of the number of units, households at each apartment complex. I'm just thinking that mechanically, I don't think our system currently could apply a multiplier percentage of some kind necessarily. I'm not saying that it couldn't, but I'm just not sure in my experience that it would be easy to do. And at the end of the day, we would have to go into each of the apartment complexes' accounts and physically put something in to address the issue, I would believe.
Okay. Councilor Ryan?
Would it be possible to just apply it based on doorsteps and then let the people themselves, maybe we supply them a voucher if they come and, say we qualify for, either the senior or the financial. and then they could be exempt?
Well, once again, what's going to happen with that is typically with a 100-unit apartment, the property management company is going to pay one bill because we have one meter. And so they're going to want the discount, not the end user. And the question is, I mean, it would actually be easier if every apartment had a meter. Because we could have, you know, that would actually make it significantly easier. So, anyway.
Well, maybe it's just the honor system of saying when they have some come to them and say, you know, we're a senior, you know, we can't afford that based on the criteria, that then they deduct it and we honor that.
Well, so once again, the apartments are just going to work it into their rent. Okay, so, and the market's going to drive who affords an apartment or not. The question is, when an apartment owner comes to you and says, I want a reduction of my $400 line item in here because 30% of my residents are below a certain, you know, because they qualify for your programs, what process are we going to have to be able to document that on one master meter for a large number of units? And that was kind of my, I don't know that we can or not, but if you want us to think about it, we can try to poke around at it and see if there's a way.
So you're saying basically that there's no way for us to make sure that that discount is reaching the people who should be getting it?
No, that I'm absolutely saying. There is no way for that to happen. The question is, can we actually interface with the people who own the apartments are going to want a discount based on a number that they tell us, whether we can verify it or not?
Trust but verify. Councillor Anderson.
This is a thorough discussion, a little challenge. Be careful.
Your surgeon is going to really be mad at you if you open that up again.
I'm not sure if we can continue going around and around to try and figure this out, because this has been under discussion for quite some time. A question I have, though, is that let's say we've got apartment complex X, and are we sending them just one bill? So if this fee were to be implemented right now, what's the fee that gets imposed on that complex?
That bill would be their water usage plus $4 times the number of units in that apartment complex.
Okay. Well, I don't know, as if we, I don't see any
Yeah,
kind
the
of
only
figuring out
question I have is,
the
do you want
path
us
forward.
do you want us to attempt to come up with a methodology for apartments or not? That's the only, that's boiling it down to the simplest terms. That's the real question.
Well, here's a possible compromise. Like I said earlier, we are not the first city out of the barn on this one. So if other cities have come up with a mechanism to do that, that is something we could amend later. If you want to consult with some similar cities to us who have tried to grapple with this.
Excellent
They may have some recommendations on how they were able to solve that problem or not. And I'd rather learn from their experience than try to spend a lot of our staff time on trying to invent a new wheel that's already been invented.
And we will
Okay.
forget about that for the moment.
We will kind of put that one into let's find out more. So is everybody good with that? Asking them to do that? Okay. Any other discussion on the motion and amendments? Councilor Anderson.
Just a final thought. I'm just a, oh,
We'll just come down the row if we want to
Thank you.
recap.
Just to be clear, you know, I'm comfortable, like I said earlier, to vote to direct staff to come back with an ordinance, and we can debate the merits of it at that point in time. Just laying out, though, I'm not comfortable with this incremental increase whatsoever, but I will support going forward with having staff come back with an ordinance.
Okay. Thank you very much. Councilor Herrera, any final thoughts on?
I think we should just go forward. We can always tweak it and work on it later. I think we're kind of going around in circles now. So I'd like to move forward and see where we go from there.
Okay. Councilor Reed?
I agree. I think we've brought up most of the important points that we need to consider at this point, and I think it's good for us sort of all to go back and think on these things and get a little bit more information where necessary, and so I agree that we should move forward.
Thank you very much. Councilor Freeman?
Great discussion by everyone, and I would probably echo Councilor Anderson. I'm not in favor of an increase within a year, but I do support the $4. So looking to have more discussion when it comes back to council.
Okay. And then the motion was to not be able to increase it
Right.
for a minimum of a year.
Yes, but I still don't think that's enough time to really look at where we are and to prove to the citizens that we've had good intentions and can actually show some progress. So, and that's not to derail any staff work or anything from the Parks Board. I just think this is a big, huge thing to bite off. And I just think we have to be realistic, as what Bill Lawyer said and also Chris. And to reiterate back to the Budget Committee of, we asked for some money for the Mid-Willamette Homeless Initiative, and the Budget Committee wanted true results for that money. And I was in supportive of that, and I think when you start new programs and new things, it takes a little while to get things off the ground, and I think we have to be realistic about that, and I think we owe it to our citizens not to just say, well, we enacted $4, if that's what happens, and then in another year, we're gonna put 6, and then we're gonna get to 8. And I'm not saying it's not needed, I just think we need to be very good stewards of our money, and I think we really have to really put some thought and not rush and just to increase fees, just to have more money coming in the door.
Okay. Good thoughts, Councilor Ryan?
I'm afraid to say what I think. I agree with everyone, and the great conversation, and that's part of my fear of why we put a cap on it, which I think is important to, keep that protective, for the community, which was also part of my point of, let's put it where it needs to be and where people, have said they can afford it and go for a little bit higher amount. And then maybe that's not what we need to look at when we come back is, what that looks like. Is that more realistic so that we're not increasing it and we can say we're not increasing it versus, yes, we have a cap. And then maybe that's just a conversation that needs to be had.
Okay.
But thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you to everybody who came and shared tonight. Thank you to everybody who has participated in the survey. Your work is not done because we expect people to continue to engage with our Parks Board and to have a voice in what our parks look like. Thank you all for this great conversation. This is new ground for Kaiser, and I'm very proud of the work that all of us have done in having this very robust and complex but very necessary conversation. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion passes unanimously, one absent. It is 9:06, and unless there's something else for the good of the order, we are adjourned.